We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome again to a very special edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young, our regular podcast interview show that we do on our Pro Cannabis Media Network. And a reminder again to like, share, and subscribe, not just to my show, but to Weed Talk News and Green Rush Live and the whole family of productions that we produce here at Pro Cannabis Media to share with you, the viewer. That's what's so important. But subscribing is also very important. And I'm really excited to welcome in our guest for today's show. His name is Ron Green. They call him the Chief. He's out of Pennsylvania, and he is a fashion icon and someone who's very, very proud of his Black heritage. Ron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, you are the CEO of Hella Black and Hella Loud Hemp Company, as well as Tribe Worldwide Apparel. Explain to me how you got into the fashion business, and did you ever think it would have anything to do with cannabis?
Oh, man. So first and foremost, thanks for having me here. I'm really glad to be here. As far as my business endeavors go, I never thought that I was going to be in fashion when I was coming up. I went to school for communications with a focus in broadcast journalism. I wanted to do what you're doing, man.
You can.
Really.
I will. Hey, wait. I will be happy to train you to have your own show. We'll talk.
Okay. All right. Nice. Yeah, because that's really what my passion was when I was in school. But I learned after school that I really also had a passion for fashion and just the different forms of expression that can be communicated through just what somebody chooses to put on a daily basis. And that's really where my interest in fashion and my cultural identity kind of came into play back in 2015, and that's how I started to develop a brand that was centered around cultural pride and the expression of the positive aspects of Blackness.
And now, as someone who is painfully unhip, that would be moi. Okay, I admit that. I get that. I saw the images that you sent of yourself as the model for your own fashion wear, for your own clothing line. Did you ever think you'd be a model, Ron? Come on, really?
So that was the thing. When I started, very quickly I learned that I had to be able to represent my brand. If I was going to sell it, I had to be willing to also wear it and be a proponent of it. So it's like, I'm wearing it every day, regardless. I'm wearing the same shirt sometimes 2 and 3 times a week. But I'm making sure that people are seeing me, being like the image that I want to put out there, and I want people to also reflect that. So I had to just do it. I had to bite the bullet, man.
Well, I tell you what, you bit the right bullet, okay? Because you look great in your own clothing line. I can tell you that. I cannot imagine, however, myself wearing that stuff out because, it's awkward for me because I'm a boring white guy. I'll admit it. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to fashion. I mean, look, it's like the Gap R Us. It's kind of like what, that's like my thing, right?
Hey, man, you look fresh, Jimmy. You look fresh, man. I like that sweater. That's a nice,
all right. I appreciate
nice
that. I appreciate that. How important is it to you to be proud of your upbringing and be proud of who you are, especially now in the cannabis space, where a lot of people who have been most impacted by the war on drugs are getting into the cannabis space?
So it's very important for me to be able to bridge the gap between these two worlds, you know, where we have people who are kind of in this legacy market, and then you have the emerging legalized market. And you know, me personally, I've been arrested 3 times for cannabis possession, you know, in past years, and it's just, you know, simple stuff. It's not like I'm running around with enough for them to say I'm trying to distribute it or anything. This is just personal use, and I'm being detained for it. So,
Right.
you know, being on that side of it, and you know, now seeing how the legalized market is just booming, this multi-billion-dollar industry, and you know, it's nice to be able to find some access points. So I seek to fully exploit that now that it's an opportunity that's availed itself to me.
I want you to know I've talked to many people of color who give me that same story about being arrested a handful of times for possession crimes. And when I hear that, my skin really boils. I get really pissed off. I get really mad because I know what the stats are. I know that Black people have been arrested 3.5 more times than white people for possession crimes, and white people and Black people actually use this substance the same amount. What does that mean? It means that you guys have been profiled and been taken advantage of. And that really pisses me off. It gets me really mad. I get chills when I hear about this because I'm someone who studied history. I know what the history is of the Black man in this country, and it is not fair, and it has never been fair. And now that it has been systematically in place for dozens, if not decades of years, I think it's time that everyone who has been most impacted by the failed war on drugs gets an opportunity to take advantage of the fact that this has been illegal and race has been involved with the prohibition of this substance for 100 years. It is time. So I support everything that you guys do in what you do. What is it like? How have people been responsive to your clothing brand and the passion that you have for cannabis? Are you being still victimized? Because we both know there's a lot of stigma out there, isn't there?
There definitely is. And you know, a lot of the stigma comes from, you know, people who also look like myself. You know, there's a lot of people who still have negative views about the impact of cannabis on our community and things of that nature. So there's a lot of I was about to say conversations, but conversations that we still need to have amongst ourselves, where we can kind of, you know, be able to effectively move forward together, because cannabis can definitely have a positive impact as we see, you know, just through medicinal use and the use in therapeutic aspects, PTSD and things of that nature. So there's when we apply it properly, there's a use that can be spoken to that have a positive effect on the community. So we just want to be able to foster that.
Absolutely, and you certainly deserve the right to do that. You thought you made a Freudian slip there when you called it a conversation, right? Did you know that one of our best shows, one of my most favorite shows that we carry, is called The Conversation with Dave Briggs and Amani Toomer? I bet you remember Amani Toomer, the football player.
Yeah, Amani. Yeah, I remember him. I hated him too, but yeah, I remember.
So Dave Briggs and Amani have interviewed Calvin Johnson and Paul Pierce and Gary Payton and Darren McCarty and Kyle Turley and all the biggest names in sports that are also invested in and also vested in the cannabis industry. And that show, just so you know, available on our YouTube channel on demand, also our Roku channel. And we live stream it all day long on Saturdays now. We call it the Daily Binge. So thank you so much for allowing me to promote my own stuff, because you wear it. I have to talk about it. You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's awesome, man. That was a beautiful segue. I love it. I
want to talk to you about the challenges as a business person. Okay. Where did you get startup capital? Who helped you out? Did you have it saved up? How did that all work? How did you become this successful entrepreneur in the fashion industry?
So first and foremost, I definitely want to give a lot of credit and thanks to my parents, just because when when my career didn't go exactly how I planned, and things, I ended up having to move back home, and they gave me a soft landing space where I'm aware that a lot of people don't have the ability to go back home sometimes. So they really allowed me to come back and recalibrate my efforts, and that's really where I discovered, my passion for fashion and my ability to be able to market myself and a brand in that way. So yeah, the startup really just comes from humble beginnings, where I just really had to start from square one, and I was working for other fashion brands, people that I was in relationship with who had their own companies, so I could learn from the inside, and I see what they done wrong, the things that they did right, and I was able to apply a lot of that information and knowledge that I gained to my own endeavors. So when I was able to get some money, some startup funds, once again, my mother was a big investor in me. She helped me get like my first press, even like my first heat press, so that I could start actually making garments from home and printing things. So I mean, I owe a lot of my start to my family, and just the relationship that we built in the bond, man.
That is awesome. I love hearing that. I actually know that of an example of that that's still going on a personal basis, but we're going to leave that alone because I do want to make it about you. I will say, however, that my parents are not around. They passed away a few years back. And I'm not quite sure I'd be a talk show host about cannabis if mom and dad were still around. I'll be perfectly honest with you. All right. They were very proud of me as a sportscaster. And I'm not quite sure they would have understood this whole cannabis thing at this point. But in the meantime, that's what parenting is all about, is embracing your children unconditionally and supporting them unconditionally with their dreams and their endeavors. And I love to think that that is still going on now. And I'm hoping that it's a lesson you've learned. So as you get more and more experienced, as we like to say, I don't like to use that word older, okay? Yeah. Experience. Like you'll be able to pass that along to your children too. If you have children or are going to think about having a family at some point, those are the lessons that I know your parents will be very proud of you to keep going. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. Absolutely.
And I'm going to guess your parents are probably younger than me, since I'm not afraid of mentioning the fact that I'm a senior citizen now at age 65. But it is what it is. I can't take away my birth date. I share that with a lot of people because, you know what? I made it this far. That's the way I look at it. There's something to be said for living 65 years on this earth, don't you think?
I believe so. And actually, my parents are both in your age bracket. They're both in that very same age range.
Fantastic. And I hope they enjoy Motown as much as I still do, too, because I still listen to the same music I listened to in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yes. That's when my mother gets control of the music, that's what's playing. Anytime we come in and Alexa's on, she's got some Motown grooves playing.
I love that. I love that. That's great. That is great. Hey, where are you in the world of, I see here cryptocurrency is something you're into. Now, I got to be honest with you. I have enough problem with American money currency, let alone the crypto world. Okay. Can you explain to me how you have an expertise in it or you're involved with it? Explain to me your involvement with cryptocurrency and maybe even explain it to me in what I would call simple terms.
Okay, so my experience with cryptocurrency goes back a few years to about, I'd say 2016, I believe, when my family we became investors in Bitcoin and a few of the other earlier coins that were introduced to the cryptocurrency market. Now, before I go in, cryptocurrency was created as a way for people, for the everyday people to take control of the value of their currency, whereas the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve, they all can dictate the value of the dollar and the distribution of dollars and how many dollars are produced. And oftentimes, as we see now, we're in the middle of you know, a big inflationary period in the market, and you know, you've got a lot of financial unrest that's going on, and companies are tanking and crashing, but you know, oil prices are through the roof and everything like that, and that's all because of the instability that's been created by the U.S. government, you know, pumping trillions of dollars into the market. They printed something. They infused the market with like 40% more money or than they've ever done. I think since like 1982 or something like that. Like they've infused the marketplace with all this money, but now what that does is decrease the value of the money that we already have. So really, what cryptocurrency is working to do, and the people who start and establish these coins and things, what they're working to do is to help establish some type of stable place where people can store the value of their money, where you don't have to worry about inflation causing you to lose 3% of your value every year, because that's what the dollar does. It does lose value every year. So with cryptocurrency, these coins actually have utility depending on the people who are using them, and you can create currency for different purposes. So each industry could have their own coins and currency that they exchange that has its own intrinsic value to them, but it wouldn't be affected by things that go on in other areas of business and commerce. So you know, it's obviously it's a whole lot more complicated than that, but really what it does is puts the power of the dollar, or well, the power of currency back into the hands of the people, where you could create a Jimmy token. You could create a Jimmy token and all your subscribers, you know, they could purchase, all your subscribers could purchase Jimmy tokens. And then if you had like special events or something like that, they could spend Jimmy tokens on these events. If you had live events or merchandise that you put out or anything, they could be spending Jimmy tokens. So that's the power that we have now.
That is crazy, but I appreciate and support the effort. I know there's a lot of risk because there's also a lot of reward in this. And with inflation and the value of the dollar, as you know, going up and down, and the economy going up and down, are we seeing the same kind of up and down effect in the crypto world too?
Absolutely, we are. We definitely are. We are currently, just like in the stock market, we're in a bear market. The same thing is affecting the same thing is in effect in the crypto market as well. There's a lot of you know, people who have lost confidence in cryptocurrency, but it's all tied to the value of the dollar and people pulling out and losing confidence in the dollar. I mean, you've got all this stuff going on with Russia, and you know, the threats of you know, oil,
nuclear war. You could say it. It's really scary. I'm telling you, it's scary. Yep.
Yeah, it is. It's a major issue right now. So there's just so many variables that are at play that we really have no control over. We're just a lot of us are subject to the conditions, and we just but cryptocurrency like seeks to serve as a safe space and a storehouse of value. So it's like in all aspects of trade and the stock market and things, traditionally you're going to have times where it's down. Everything right. That you know is up and down. But you know, one thing we know is that the trend for the market has always been an upward trend. So we're down now, but we'll be back up soon. So that's where my confidence lies with the crypto market as well.
All right. Well, that's good. Look, I have an older brother who's very successful, and he knows a lot of friends who are invested in this crypto world. And I just look at it from the outside in because, like I said, I'm not even comfortable having a few cash bucks in my pocket anymore because everything's a tap and a slide and an insert and debt financing is the way of America. And I'm like, does that make a lot of sense? I can't quite understand that, right?
Yeah.
Hey, what myths and stereotypes? I know we're all in it together in that we are trying to educate the public that is still living in the past of prohibition. Do you see yourself as someone who has to go out and advocate for the culture and for the acceptance of, of this plant?
Absolutely. As somebody who has been enjoying the use of cannabis well over 20 years now. I got my start when I experiment with friends in college, you know, but I fell in love with it ever since then. And I've used it for, you know, recreational use. I've used it for, you know, therapeutic and medicinal uses as well. So, you know, I'm just a huge proponent of the legalization of it and the push for the normalization of it in the usage of it in public places, the consumption of it, you know, and just you know, taking away all of the negative ideas that kind of attribute themselves to reefer madness. You know, a lot of these things that people still believe in today about the plant and everything, and then even all the harsh and harmful rumors that are going around now that people are spraying the plants with things that turn people that make guys feminine. I'm hearing all these things that they're like, it's only in an effort to further delegitimize the use of the plant and make it harder for us to be able to get that legislation through. So, you know, any effort that I can make to kind of go against that type of useless, mindless chatter, like that's what I'm going to do. So I felt like, you know, my brand, Hello Black, Hello Loud, exists, you know, in a space to be able to do just that. And you know, I'm definitely, even like us having this conversation here is just another effort to really just help to normalize it. And I thank you for allowing me this time here.
Are you kidding me? I love this kind of thing. This is what I live for. This is what I believe in. It's the education and of responsible use of a plant that God put on this earth to bring all of us together. That's the whole point. That's why it has a medicinal quality. And, you know, I bet you've said the same thing or met people that say the same thing. Cannabis has changed my life. Cannabis has saved my life. I can't tell you how many interviews that I've had with people that do that all the time. It's why we want to give a forum to those that have been most impacted by the failed war on drugs and those that are learning how to use it responsibly. Because guess what? As you know, something that affects me one way may not affect you that way. That's the whole thing about the endocannabinoid system that's in all of us that balances our emotions and our feelings and how what kind of effect that can have on it. So you're 100% right. Communication and talking about this is what we those of us in the business like yourself have to continue to do. Am I right?
Absolutely, I 100% agree. Really, what that's what makes me I got the chills right now just thinking about how much misinformation is out here, but you know, it just shows us how much work there is left to be done. But the thing is, I'm excited because that gives us purpose, right? That gives us something to do. It gives us something to talk about. And, you know, I just, all the great people that I've met along the way, like even like yourself, this is incredible. So I'm just very grateful to be in communication and be in the company of people who are like-minded and positive and moving and pushing the culture forward.
That's right. And as old as your parents too, you can say that too. Hey, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about your nickname, okay? Because you know it has a personal thing for me. You're called the Chief. How did that happen?
So that started as a child, like a very young child. My grandfather on my mother's side, he called me Chief. He called me Chief from a very young age, and everybody in my family, you know, on that side was calling me Chief as well. And you know, a few years ago, when I created the name for my clothing brand, Tribe Worldwide Apparel Company, I'm like, every tribe has a chief, and it's, you know, it was only right that I, you know, kind of retain that moniker and kind of bring it back current. So, you know, it was that's where I kind of that's where Chief came from. That's where it came from, and I'm
Love it.
Yeah, I embody it, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my grandpa, you know, lessons he taught me, but having that nickname, you ever heard like what's in a name? Like when you have a name like that, you kind of have to embody certain traits. You know what I mean? So I like to ascribe that to myself because then it reminds me to carry myself a certain way and to treat others a certain way. be diplomatic and to be understanding and reasonable and, you know, all these things like that, but also be able to delegate responsibility and all of that as well.
I love that leadership and integrity and all those qualities. And it was my late dad who was nicknamed the Chief too. And I explained to you that he was the when I was a little child playing baseball. I think I was age 7 at the time. It was just after T-ball. And my dad was the manager of the Hurons in my town. And needless to say, as the manager, he became the chief of the Hurons. And that nickname stuck with him through his professional life and adulthood. And of course, the kids, myself and my brother, always, you know, use it as a respectful phrase and you know, like a PhD. You know what I'm saying? I don't need PhD or MBA. I need the chief was enough of respect. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. I love it. I love it.
Hey, Ron, how do people get to your clothing line? Let them go online and find out about Hella Black and Hella Proud workout gear and all the stuff you have. Where can they find it? Oh, man. Well, you can check all of my offerings out at tribestyles.com. tribestyles.com. That's our website. Then if you want to follow us on social media and see what we've got going on, you can check us out on Instagram at Dope Tribe Worldwide. And then Dope Tribe. Okay.
Yeah, DOPETRIBE Worldwide. And then you can
help me out with this, will you please? Some people, when I go to these trade shows, right, and they want to pay me a compliment and they say, hey, man, you're dope. And I didn't realize that was like a compliment now, right?
Yes, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. It's like you are dope, Jimmy. You're dope, man. Like this show is dope. I appreciate the opportunity, man. This is awesome. All right. Well, for the chief, Ron Green, and the CEO of the Hella Black and Hella Proud and all that neat stuff that he's put together, thank you so much for joining us on In the Weeds. And remember, right, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to In the Weeds. We'll see you next time.
As a broker, we have access to many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first. Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at ProCannamedia, and on twitch.tv/ProCannabisMedia. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome again to a Friday afternoon edition of Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and sometimes regular host of this program. We've been doing this program on Friday afternoons from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time for the last 3 years. And we've had some incredible shows, incredible guests. And this particular one that's upcoming is definitely going to, I don't know if it's going to raise the bar, but it's certainly going to get to that bar. And I'm not talking about the bar in your neighborhood town. I'm talking about a level of expertise and entertainment and educational content. This week, I can tell you that my regular guest host, Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge, and also our Washington State correspondent from We Talk News will be joining me alongside as the guest host. Hello, Josh.
Hello, Jimmy.
Good to talk with you. Good to see you. And we're so happy to have Jeanne Sullivan with us. She is with Arcview. Arcview is involved with a major investment conference this coming week in New York City. It's called Live in NYC. Jeanne Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us here on Green Rush Live.
Thank you, Jimmy and Josh. Hey, listen, this is big news because do you know when the last live Arcview event was? I was there. February 2020, Santa Monica. So we are thrilled that we're back. This is the first time. And here's the other thing I'm so proud of. That event was my 22nd Arcview event because I've been on the team for that many years, curating, trying to make it happen on stage, having a ball, and a one way to get to know the business and get to know the fabulous people in our business.
It is remarkable, isn't it? I spent 3 days at a conference this past weekend, and I so enjoy the camaraderie, collaboration, and the passion that pretty much anybody who's in this business as an entrepreneur, as an investor, or a regular business person, we all share that passion for this. We realize we're all part of history. Am I right, Jeanne?
Totally. It is a real hallmark of our cannabis sector, a real collegiality that exists, and we really seek that. And something else we seek, we want to have more women and diverse people as part of the business. Oh, look, I'm a longtime tech investor, and we want to make a difference because that isn't what happened in the tech world. So we're really trying hard to promote that.
Yeah. Hey, we are supposed to be getting one of the co-founders of Arcview. Troy Gayton has been invited onto this show, and I'm sure the many staffers that I have on my team are out trying to connect with him and get him the right link as well, just in case he might be on. I believe he's on Pacific time. Am I right, Jeanne?
That's right.
Yeah, Josh, you're on Pacific time, right?
I'm in New York City.
That's
and,
right. That's what we like to do here. Is we connect both coasts. This is what I like, and I think Arcview has a history of that too, because it was started by Troy and Steve D'Angelo, right?
two incredible pioneers. I'm very hopeful that Troy jumps on. He's a wonderful guy. And you know what? Here's the thing. They didn't even start it for what it ended up to be. They started because they were appalled at the terrible social justice infractions, people going to jail, and by the way, 12 years later, they're still going to jail. But luckily, that is somewhat curbed. But they started it to help fight the fact that people were being incarcerated just for the plant. And then it morphed and they became the go-to community where investors would meet entrepreneurs. And here's the cool thing that's so amazing. That community, and I was there for many, many years of these last 12 years in those meetings, in these events, that community of members invested $300 million in just about every cannabis company there is. And so that's how really Arcview built that community, and really we're the only game in town. And this happened just very serendipitously because people love to get together, back to what you were saying, being collegial, being supportive of each other, sharing deal flow, sharing ideas. And that's what created Arcview and the vibrancy. So here we are again, recreating that connection.
And there's been a few developments, let's just say, since the last live Arcview webinar, conference, investment group, however you want to call this event coming up in New York City. The President of the United States, I know I heard this a few weeks ago, actually mentioned the fact, and this is the first time I've heard a president actually mention the fact that the cannabis laws in the United States are a little screwed up, let's just say. And he has tried again to live up to his campaign promises and also start that ball rolling of descheduling. And I believe the Secretary of Health and Human Services has already started to look into the descheduling of cannabis. He did, quote unquote, let 6,500 federally guilty people who had possession crimes of cannabis free. Now, a lot of people in the industry say he didn't do enough. That's an easy thing to poke at, obviously, because I think everyone in the industry and 70% of our populace now wants this plant legalized. Jeanne, first of all, I need to get your reaction to what President Biden did and said a few weeks ago.
So let me give you the inside baseball on that one, Jimmy.
Okay.
There is a very hardcore group, and Steve D'Angelo, one of the wonderful OGs and pioneer and co-founder of Arcview. I was with them the other night at a wonderful dinner party right here in New York City. There's a really strong group of advocates that really did behind the scenes force Biden to say all that when he said it, but they're still upset because it hasn't gone far enough. There's still thousands of people in our jails and prisons. And so we want Biden to live up to his campaign promises. But here's kind of the sad story. And look, I want our president to prevail on this issue. I want change. I so want safe banking. Heck, I want federal legalization. But the sad truth is that there's a lot of constituencies that don't want that and have been the primary funders of people like Chuck Schumer, our very senator here in New York, who's been, has a bill, to reform cannabis regulation and legalization, and Biden, who's been openly against, he's been against this whole issue for years. So finally, he is at least saying these things. Now, here's what to pay attention to. What scares those of us who so want this to happen is he used the word scheduling. Notice you use the word descheduling. That's what we want. But he didn't use that word. So what scares us is he thinking about rescheduling? If he reschedules to Schedule 2, guess who has Schedule 2 licenses? Big Pharma.
Right.
But if he does reschedule to Schedule 3, that does mean it's more open, and 280E, that draconian tax law, terrible tax law, that doesn't even allow you to deduct ordinary and reasonable business expenses, that would go away under Schedule 3. Having said that, I want to be clear. We want it descheduled. Let fair markets and free markets prevail.
Absolutely. And Josh, I know you're very well versed on all this, being from Washington State now anyway. Walk us through what you think the Washington State's process and how have they actually learned anything along the way of being one of the first states to legalize?
I think they learned how to do it wrong. There was that misconception I think a lot of people have where it's like, let's just push this through and then we'll fix it. And then a decade goes by and you're like, oh, wait, we haven't fixed it yet. I was naive about the Class C felony on maintaining and operating a cannabis lounge. That was half a decade ago. And we haven't made any progress on that at all, even though I wrote the bill in 2019, but then COVID has stalled that. So while we wait for delivery and while we wait for, all of these other things, we still have one of the highest taxes out there, one of the most competitive marketplaces, but it's slowly working its way out now as we all try to work together rather than against each other.
So is that the lesson we learned? It's better to work together and learn from the mistakes from the past of perhaps the first couple of states. I mean, did Colorado get it more right than Washington State?
I don't know. I mean, they have vertically integrated opportunities. They have the ability to have outside investment capital. They have all of these other things that we don't have. So I think, we can learn from that and change that a bit. But there's so many other things like social equity and, cafes and delivery. And I mean, the list goes on for what we need here.
Well, let's talk about that because we're going to have on our stage the two architects. And of course, it's two powerful, smart women who were the architects of what's called the MRTA statute, which is the statute for New York State that legalizes adult use regulation. That happened on March 31st, a year ago, so in 2021. Now note, the regulations are not out yet, so we're waiting for that, which will refine and define the statute. And we're anxiously waiting for that. But you know what? To do it right, it's complicated. It takes time. It takes a staff of people. And they really just appointed that team over the last several months. I'm sure you know the name Tremaine Wright. She is the chairman of what's called the OCB. And then Chris Alexander, he's the executive director. Now, we want all this to happen yesterday, but it does take time. I think people are patient about that. Now, here's what's up, though, that is exciting. Of course, to what you both said, can't these states learn from each other? I'm hopeful because I'm proud and a long time, New Yorker. I want our program to be one of the best of all. We were the 19th state to adopt adult use regulation. Why not learn? Here's a few things we did do right in the statute. We're the only state that has in the statute social consumption lounges. So you see how Nevada and other states have had to fight for that legislatively. It's built into the statute. Why not? New York's a great, nightlife town and social consumption kind of place with other libations. So we do see this. We had a great conference last year in the Rainbow Room. Why not go to the Rainbow Room, have a beautiful dinner, and have your canned drink or a delicious, cannabis beverage there? So that's built in. Another thing they built in, to your point, Josh, is social equity focus. So they did something that no other state has done. They said, okay, if you have a certain conviction and other business acumen that you can show us, we're going to let 150 applicants, it's called CARD, the acronym is CAURD, pronounced CARD, stands for Conditional Adult Use Recreational Dispensary License. They're going to go to the front of the line. That deadline's already passed. 904 applications were submitted, and 150 are going to be picked. Then, and they're ahead of everybody. The regular portal for everybody else has not even been issued yet. So they're at the front of the line. They are going to await being selected based on what they put in their application. And then listen to this, very unusual. Again, the only state that's done this. the state is going to provide the lease for these 150 dispensaries. So they will have to pay for the lease, but the state's going to acquire them. Then they can decorate it however they want. So put some personal touch on it, but it's going to be turnkey. The software, the infrastructure, and that sort of thing is going to be provided. So the applicant, the license holder, will have to raise some money, but not the millions and millions that's typically needed for a dispensary. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's amazing, and I think it's also fair and about time and all those things. But I got to tell you something, and Josh, I'm interested to get your feeling on this too. In Massachusetts, and I now just found out in New York, private events are okay for consumption. The weekend that I just enjoyed in Boxborough, Massachusetts, was a private event where the producers and organizers took over the Boxborough Regency Hotel, and there was open consumption. There was no alcohol allowed. Everybody was wearing a plus 21 bracelet. It was very well handled, and there was no big deal about it at all. In fact, the police enjoy cannabis events because you don't get as rowdy on the product as you might on alcohol. And that being said, in New York City a few weeks ago, I went to the Medley Supper Club. Now, Jeanne, have you ever been there or heard about this place?
Not yet, but they're one of the speakers at our event, so I understand who they are.
That was a great experience, okay? First of all, I was amazed, that it was open consumption. There was a pre-roll at my plate when I arrived at my dinner seat. There was open consumption indoors. It was a beautiful, I think it was a 5-course meal. It was outstanding food, no alcohol, mocktails that were also infused with cannabinoids. And again, I didn't hear of any incidents. I think everybody had a great time. It was networking at its best. And it was in the heart of New York City. So to me, and Josh, I know you're working on this, to me, the social club exists. It's just not public yet.
Well, let me give you a great nuance. Yesterday, I listened to 10 companies pitch because I often am involved in these pitch fests. And this woman was pitching in Colorado that you can't even consume in the public. In the statute, guess what they did here, which is so brilliant? You can smoke or use cannabis anywhere you can smoke or use cigarettes.
Right.
And in these private, now many hotels will not allow that even here. But if you're on the sidewalk or on the rooftop in a home or whatever, yes, consumption is totally legal. So this is thrilling to some old timers. Steve D'Angelo said he delights in walking down the street smoking a joint because it's the first time he could do it legally. So again, there's some brilliance to this statute. The 2 women who designed this are on our stage this next week. And hey, this is great. We like this because why should you be in Colorado where you're not even allowed to light up? And so thus causing all kinds of issues. So yes, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Hey, Josh, I know you're involved with making some changes in Washington State. Why don't you give us an update on what's going on?
Yeah. Well, I ended up reviewing a bunch of bills, 11 different states. New York, we reviewed it was later on after 2019 when we submitted it, but they did have some good stuff in there. Like Jeanne mentioned, Washington has got some support at the House Rep level. House Rep Kloba, Shelley Kloba, is interested in helping us to kind of push this and allow for the consumption to open up. And hopefully that'll also include social equity, help small businesses, allow for medical patients, and small business growth. All of those things should benefit as a result.
One of the things that it seems to be consistent about this issue, and here in Massachusetts, they still have not opened up any official public social consumption lounges. I believe they've moved forward on it, past some of the regulations, and now they're looking at licensees and maybe doing some experimental one-day licenses out there for different events, like the one I was just in attendance at Boxborough, Massachusetts. But they're still dragging their feet a little bit. I think they're really afraid of, first of all, mixing alcohol and cannabis is not a good thing. I just want to say
not a good thing.
It's not a good. It's an 8 time if you walk into a bar under the influence of cannabis and have a sip of a drink, you're now going to be 8 times as intoxicated.
You're blotted.
Right. And you do not want to get behind the wheel of a car at that point. Okay. Again, I'm really big on responsible use of both products, certainly. I think that's been drilled in our heads now, thanks to Mothers Against Drunk Driving and that whole initiative. But now, as we all know, there's still a lot of fear about people operating under the influence of cannabis. And I want to get your feelings about this, because I'm not saying that I'm saying that if you have too much of it, don't get behind the wheel of a car. However, there are some people that have been driving under the influence of cannabis since the 60s. I remember the front plates that used to say "Arrive Stoned." Does anybody in here? Oh, Jeanne, you do remember. Do you remember?
No, that's not my thing.
It wasn't my thing either, but it was because I was 10 years old. But I do remember the front plates "Arrive Stoned" on a license plate, on a car license plate. And I just don't know, is that what's holding it back more than anything else? Is the people's fear of this?
People are afraid of this, and it's a legitimate concern. And of course, balance, appropriate use is critical for people to understand that. And the other thing that's related, we need to have more knowledge. We need to understand efficacy. We need to understand tolerances and what people can take. Listen, I've got myself in trouble by not understanding how much THC was in something. And so everybody reacts differently. And yeah, we don't want people, killing people and running down people by overdoing it, or feeling lousy, by taking too much. Yes, I agree. I have a few funky pictures of people that I'm married to who managed to have a few scotches and then smoked a joint. And it's not a good thing. It's not pretty.
That's also a major headwind, is the lobbyists for drunk driving and Clean Air Indoor Act. So employees trying to, that you can't be in a smoky environment and then drunk driving. But the reality is what we're seeing is a decrease in DUIs across all regulated states, a decrease in consumption of alcohol, taxes of cannabis taking over taxes of alcohol.
Correct.
So I think the fear is greater than the reality. But they're fearful of the unknown. Once you open up this establishment, you can't really take that back, and I don't think they want to release that yet. And so there's a lot of headwinds. But once we can push through that fear of drunk driving, I think we can make some serious headwinds.
You're right to address that. And so, being a longtime investor, I've had my binoculars on, looking for products that could help, mitigate this problem. But believe it or not, and I've seen every product that's out there that, let's say, lawmakers or police departments could buy or use. But guess what? There's a variety of form factors, from measuring breath to measuring blood to measuring, attention span, and none of them have really gotten traction. They're expensive, they're kludgy, and it's a problem. But that is one way that lawmakers think that they could help the problem. But the problem there's not been a good technology solution.
It's education and research.
Correct.
This is what needs to be emphasized in this industry, I believe, so that we can learn, because it does affect everybody differently. I mean, I know people that are in their 30s that are taking like 100 milligrams of THC a day and functioning. Now, there's also something called a functioning alcoholic. That being said, the point is everybody in everybody is different, and it affects everybody differently. And those that take it medicinally, including oncologists, doctors who want to help their cancer patients out, and they are frustrated because they're limited, even in legal states, of a 5 milligram serving in any a beverage, for instance. So there's so much education that still needs to be done.
Let's stay on this, because here's a relevant fact that relates to what you just said. Even CBD now, many tinctures and gummies and all have enough THC in it to really get somebody buzzed. And now you can walk into any CBD store and buy a Delta 8 product. And let me tell you something. If our teenage kids and other people got a hold of it unknowingly, it really does do a number. So the education, the labeling is critical, and we need more of that. So yeah, important.
And you would like to see, there are some states that have banned Delta 8, especially legal adult use states in the United States. Would you like to see a ban on Delta 8?
No, I can't say I would, but I do want good labeling. I want good knowledge. So listen to this. I was just with a major distributor who's in California, the #1 distributor. And he said this product called Wonder, which is a terrific Delta 8 drink, I've tasted it, is the #1 leading beverage next to Can. I'm sure you've heard of CANN.
Yep.
It's the #1 low seltzer, low dose THC drink. It's delicious in a variety of tastes. But Wonder is right behind it. And I know Alexei, the CEO, he's just a dynamic CEO. And I don't want that product off the shelf. I want it on the shelf, but I want people to know. And I've walked into these CBD stores, bought a gummy, Delta 8 gummy with 25 milligrams of Delta 8, and it's really much too powerful.
Right. I agree.
And teenagers and kids can walk in and buy that.
That's right. And again,
so I'm against that, but I want to see some possible age requirements now on that.
Absolutely, 100%. Jeanne Sullivan from Arcview, you give us another plug about the big investment summit coming up in New York City, and tell us a little bit how people can find out about more, because I've been on your website. It's all over your website.
Yes. Well, we're thrilled to be back live because people want to get together, as you know. Mm-hmm. And although we used to be the only game in town, we're not, but that's okay, because guess what? More and more net new people have awakened to, hey, how do I invest in this industry? What should I invest in? Where are the great companies or CEOs? So we're thrilled to bring that together along with a number of terrific thought leaders. And that's what's going to happen starting Wednesday night in New York City, starting with a big fun reception. Steve D'Angelo and Troy Dayton will be there. And we're going to have a big fun gathering. It's at a terrific event space called Convene at 45th and Park. And we welcome people to come. And then all day Thursday, which is October 20th, we have a rich set of sessions. I've already mentioned the 2 architects of the MRTA, which is our New York statute. So Senator Liz Kruger, State Senator Liz Kruger, and the chairman of the New York State Assembly, Crystal Peoples-Stokes. These 2 women fought for years to create this bill and got it passed. So they're on stage with a terrific reporter as moderator. And then we've got several more very interesting sessions all lined up, fast-paced and interesting, never boring. And then we've done something very, very cool. We have brought together many, many institutional investors who are active investing in cannabis companies. And we put them on stage. We're calling it a reverse pitch. So they're standing, hey, I'm from EEC. I'm Matt Hawkins, the founder of Entourage Effect Capital, and here's my fund, and here's what I'm looking for. And I want to meet you if you fit our metrics. And so entrepreneurs, attendees, other investors can meet about 15 of these investors. We're thrilled for that. Then the next morning, we're having an Ask Me Anything. So again, the investors are in the room and the audience is able to ask away, hey, do I have to have an NDA? Is this something you're looking for? How do I get a meeting with you? That kind of question. And then Friday afternoon, from Friday late morning, we have 9 really great companies doing a short pitch and, mingling with the attendees. So we're just thrilled to be back and present this kind of collection of people and thought leaders.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'll be there and I appreciate it. I just sent the link to Jeff Finkle. He'll be joining us as soon as he deplanes. So Jeanne Sullivan from Arcview Group, best of luck this week. I look forward to seeing you in 3 dimensions. You know, this Zoom thing, I'm tired of it. I like seeing people with depth perception, if you will.
Great fun. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thanks, Jeanne.
Delighted to be here.
You bet. And we'll be back with more, including a really cool panel coming up next. Don't go away.
19 I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you gonna do tonight? Oh, just, you know, like every other night, just gonna lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the second half hour of Green Rush Live on a Friday afternoon here on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the host of Green Rush Live, along with Josh Kincaid, our regular fill-in guest host, if you will, and also a correspondent on our Weed Talk News show, which, by the way, follows this live stream, this really live stream, if you will, at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And if you haven't seen Weed Talk News, I'm very, very proud of the effort that the people put this thing together from all over the country and even the world sometimes. We have reporters in Israel and Europe and Canada now, and they contribute their little 90-second view of what's going on in the cannabis space as we continue to document the end, or at least the beginning of the end, of prohibition of cannabis in this state. But we are talking about the Arcview Investment Summit that's coming up this week in New York City. And yes, Pro Cannabis Media is a media sponsor. And Sarah Falvo joins us. She is, of course, one of the business development people at Arcview. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy. Always fun to chat with you.
Yep. And also Scott Delgado. He is of the managing director of Capital Markets. Scott, welcome to Green Rush Live, and tell us a little bit about what you do as managing director of Capital Markets.
Sure. Thank you. Glad to be here, Jimmy. Appreciate it. And Josh and Sarah, great to see you. My role is handling public capital markets transactions for my broker dealer, IPOs and follow-ons. We do a fair bit of that activity, not quite so much in cannabis, but that'll come someday. And I also lead a cannabis-focused investment banking team of 5 bankers around the country, working with operators on debt and equity raises and strategic activity.
Well, you opened up that little comment, that little subject, debt and equity raises. Sarah, would you like to describe what the differences are there, or should I let Scott do that?
I'll let Scott do that. He's the pro. I'm pro at other things.
Scott, what's the difference between equity financing and debt financing? And isn't debt financing the American way?
They're both pretty common in our American capitalism. In cannabis, it's harder to raise equity these days. Equity is kind of the riskiest part of the capital structure. It's the part where the returns after you pay off the debtors, that's all left. The value's left for the equity holders. They don't get a fixed coupon. They don't get their money back unless there is some kind of a sale, or they can sell their shares in the public market. Whereas debt financing is more widely available. There's a good bit of debt capital that's been raised around the marketplace, and these are senior secured. Typically in the industry, you have to pay interest on it. It's pretty high in cannabis. You're talking teens rates. Sometimes there's warrants attached to it, but this is people try to layer in debt on their real estate, and others they think it's a lower cost of capital. Tends to be, but you have to pay those interest payments. And if your business struggles, as some in cannabis have and can, given the volatility, making those interest payments can be hard, and you might lose your company or have to go have some tough conversations. So there's flexibility in cost differences between the two, are some of the major differences.
Yeah, Sarah, can we take the temperature of the cannabis industry right now? Because it was just about, I want to say, a month ago, we had a show. Kurt Dalton from Cannabis.net had written a great little opinion piece, I think they call them blogs, about how the cannabis industry is failing and is dying, and woe is me. And I'd like to get a better feel from someone who's in the trenches, if you will. Is it dying? Is it more difficult to get investment right now? What is the temperature of the industry?
Absolutely. I think that it's hard to get investment just period right now, no matter what type of industry it is. It's just the markets, and just everybody's kind of having cold feet. But there is optimism. I think I'm based in California, so I kind of see firsthand the just kind of dumpster fire, more or less, of what's going on over here. It's just oversaturation, race to the bottom with prices. So we as California are going through that right now, but there's optimism everywhere else. So like our event is in New York next week. And just the buzz in that state for what is coming is so exciting. So that's also one of the reasons we chose to do our show out there versus California, because it's just a different type of climate right now. So I think that there's growing pains as each mature market is just going through that. But there's so much opportunity still. So there's absolutely optimism out there.
Josh, as someone who's managed funds in the past, if you will, what's your feeling about the temperature of the cannabis industry right now? And, I think Sarah put a very realistic spin on it. How do you view it?
I think there's a lot of consolidation. There's a lot of folks that are in high license areas, Oregon to Oklahoma. The West is kind of on fire right now. So there's a lot of distressed assets available. So there's kind of this East Coast, West Coast. There's a lot of excitement on the East Coast. I went to New York and Chicago and did some pot shop crawls. And I don't think the numbers are going to reach what the estimates are for New York, but it's going to be interesting. California will reign supreme. It's just fifth largest GDP. If Newsom can hold on to its population and businesses, assuming that, I don't think New York has a chance.
Scott, I want to let you get in on this one. What's your feeling about the New York market, the potential, the upside? And like everything in cannabis, it's almost like dog years. It just takes time to develop.
It's very well said. We like to say things just take longer and they cost a lot more in cannabis, kind of a couple of truisms. My sense is, on just generally speaking on the temperature, it's hard to paint the temperature brush too broadly. Every state is its own marketplace, and so there's kind of capital flows, which are pretty tepid right now and pretty cold. And then there's just the industry fundamentals, and they're strong in places like New Jersey, but there has been heavy commoditization in certain states like Michigan a little sooner than people thought. And so, that's kind of can put a damper on kind of specific activity in a certain state. But New York is right around the corner. There's been a tremendous amount of activity with the hemp licenses, the hemp farmers who kind of got themselves THC licenses. That's really been going on all year long. A lot of interest in trying to partner with those folks and find farms and kind of sort that out. I think there's people that, broadly speaking, these retail stores, we're wondering when they're going to get open. I think that's a big question. The state's kind of said they're hoping to get, I think, 20 open by the end of the year. I think, a lot of people think that's going to be lower than that. And so then into next year, even if you have these farmers growing cannabis now, what stores are they going to put them in? And so I think that, there is some concern that the retail stores won't get open. There's a lot of talk about the kind of gray market that's popped up. In New York City, it's very prevalent, and the kind of concerns that you could have a kind of a persnickety gray market really developing before the legal market does. So I think you've seen, if you look at a big picture, big public companies, Ascend backed out of their deal with MedMen to step away from New York. And then just today, Verano ended its deal with Goodness Growth, which also had a New York asset. So I think you've seen some big players kind of say it may not be, a real rosy marketplace right away. It's going to take a while. And that's kind of my view. And I think that's a borderline of consensus. If you're not in the state, you're kind of wondering how quickly you should be getting in at this point.
Yeah. Sarah, do you concur with Scott's assessment of that?
Absolutely. Everything he just said, even from the gray market stores in New York, which will absolutely have an impact on illegal markets, especially, we see that in California too. There is opportunity still. So yes, I absolutely agree.
All right. Well, I think I see a new member in our Zoom room. I believe that's, is it Seibo Shen with us? Hello? Is he there? We see him. He's
now he is.
Yeah. Well, let's just see if we can get him connected. But it's a very nice still photo of him right now in our Zoom room. So we'll keep talking. The gray market is probably the biggest winner in the ongoing legalization movement or decriminalization movement, because I really think that the legal movement hasn't matured enough to really take on a competitor who can completely undercut the pricing and also deliver quality product out there. How big a factor is this gray market that's always been around in California, Sarah, hasn't it?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, Humboldt County is king still.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a hard topic because, in my mind, I would never, ever buy an unregulated vape or edible or anything like that. But on the flip side, I also don't hold it against people when they get their flower from a plug. So my own personal views, it's hard because you don't want to pay $65, $70 for an eighth of flour going out the store. And especially if you're a heavy consumer, that is a lot of money. However, like I would never touch a beverage in a gray market. I would never like take any consumables like that from a gray market. So it's interesting. It's still it's being worked out here. It definitely has an impact. I think more counties are lifting the bans on retail and are being more open to that. So it'll be interesting. It's not going anywhere, the gray market, no matter how much regulation and legalization comes. So that's kind of just a main point in general too.
All right, I think we have now connected with Seibo. Are you with us, Seibo Shen? Hello?
You guys, how's everyone doing?
There we go. We're doing well. We're happy you're joining us here. Can you give us a little background on exactly what you're up to? And I know you have had some experience with the cannabis industry from both a positive front, and also if you were in the vape world, that too was a tad controversial there for a while, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I am still partially in the cannabis industry. I stepped down as CEO last February to focus on a mindset and meditation coaching business. And primarily, most of my clients are burnt out cannabis entrepreneurs. So that's why I say I still have one foot in the door in the cannabis industry. But my overall experience with the cannabis industry has been extremely, extremely positive. I know there's a lot of polarizing things that have gone on, but at least for me, all of it was a lot of great personal, professional growth. And yeah, when VapeGate hit, it was not music to my ears, but it did really push me as an entrepreneur and to really, understand like the products that we're putting out there, how they're affecting people. And, I guess pat on back for ourselves, none of our products ever had lead, mercury, cadmium, or any of the toxic metals that were found in the cartridges that were part of VapeGate.
Yeah, I understand your company was Vape Exhale, am I right?
Yes, correct. Vape Exhale and Hanu Labs.
Yeah, and I loved how you called it VapeGate, by the way. That wasn't lost on me. How much of an effect did that have on your business, obviously?
That had a huge effect on our business. Even though our products did not contain any of the toxic metals and things of that nature, business was down probably anywhere between 40 and 60%. So there was definitely a big impact. And that's why I was saying it really pushed me to be an entrepreneur, because, we had to figure out different ways to keep the business running. Even when the revenue wasn't coming in, and whether that was through raising more investment dollars or cutting back or just figuring out, different things that we could do to keep the lights on and make use of the talent on our team. And we had to get really resourceful and scrappy in order to make it through that.
Can you speculate how much you would have made if cafes were legal? Because you and I met in 2015 with the Seattle Super Chronic Cafe. And that's how I found Vape Exhale. We met through San Francisco Mutual Connection, and I got one of your units. It's still a felony to have a cafe in Washington, but can you speculate on what that would have done to your revenues?
I could speculate and say, yes, our revenues would be significantly higher. Our device, actually, I have it sitting right next to me, is a plug-in vaporizer that would be really great for lounges that really wanted something that was on 24/7, that could both do flower and concentrates in one device. And so, for me, I love the idea of cannabis lounges and being able to have people come from multiple areas or multiple parts of the town and just sit down and really enjoy cannabis together. That was one of my biggest dreams. And that's why we designed the first device to be this way. But because that never came into fruition, the vape pens and the more portable and stealthy devices really got really popular. And that's what we ended up making too. And that's where the majority of our revenue came in from, was from the vape cartridges. But my heart was always with, the devices that really gave the best user experience. And then I really loved the whole aspect of, I do love cannabis, but one of the reasons why I loved it so much was being able to sit down with different people, just share a joint, be able to talk about whatever was top of mind that day, and really expand my knowledge base and my consciousness while doing that.
Yeah, the socialization of this plant and the role it's played in our world has always lent itself to hanging out with people. And I tell you what, it brings total strangers together when you get right down to it. I can admit that, right? Look at he's all excited about that. Hey, Scott, I got to go back to you and ask some financial questions if you don't mind. As you probably are aware, there's all sorts of doom and gloom, economic predictions going on. We're near a recession. We've got runaway inflation, or at least enough inflation to drive us all nuts. We've had an international war that has impacted our own world from day to day pricing at supermarkets. And now I hear that the investment dough is slowly, it's not drying up, it's just slowing down. What's your assessment? What's going to bring us back, and how much of an impact is our current economy having on investment in the cannabis space?
Big questions there. If I had a crystal ball, I'd be, managing money probably like Josh does. I think, look, we had a really long bull run, and a really nice go, and that doesn't go on forever. And you've had a series of things kind of really cause that dislocation. Interest rates are such a massive driver in finance markets, and so when kind of supply chain woes and things are causing inflation to tick up, and we've got good employment, the Fed's got to focus on the other side of their mandate, which is price stability. And so that's, caused raising of interest rates, and everybody's been waiting all year for inflation to come down. And it needs to come down significantly so the Fed doesn't have to keep raising rates higher. It's really pretty straightforward. The Fed interest rates need to be above the inflation rate, period. And until there's that kind of a matchup, rates kind of need to go up. So inflation's continued to remain high. You talk about, kind of fuel costs and things, cost of food, it hits the consumer in the pocketbook. And they've pulled back on their cannabis spending, really clearly. I think, there's always been some question of, is this, kind of a consumer staple like alcohol and cigarettes, and people will kind of, give up, going to the movies before they give that up. And I think we're still seeing that people are buying their cannabis. What we're hearing a lot from operators is they're really just downshifting to some value products. And so they're still getting their cannabis. They're just choosing cheaper cannabis, with the money they have to spend. So you have part of the slowdown in cannabis is a little bit of a, kind of the commoditization, but also just, a little bit of slowdown there at the register. It's not going away. There's just, more states coming online, more consumers that are going to learn about it. It's just the long trend of growth here. We'll just have some years where it's not 25 or 30%. It's just 5% or 10%. This kind of feels like one of those years, off the heels of, some really blockbuster years, around COVID and the stimulus checks. And that probably drove people to buy more cannabis than they are today.
Yeah. Sarah, as someone who's out in California way, there's so many issues in that marketplace, and yet the numbers are still very supportive of the number one market in the United States is still California. So no matter how screwed up it is, there's still a pretty vibrant community out there, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I think we're just a state full of stoners, to be honest with you. So we like to consume, and yes, but I truly do. I think, I grew up here in San Diego in the 80s. It was very common for everyone to be smoking cannabis all around. So I think it's just been more accepted in general, specifically in California, and that helps. And I think as the new markets come on and acceptance becomes wider spread, and that whole stigma thing, I can't believe we're still talking about stigma, but when that goes away, then those markets will grow. But I still think California might hold on to that number one spot.
That's right. That's right. And it's interesting. Now Seibo, you've transitioned out a little bit. You've gone away from the vape world, and you're now into the more of the wellness world. Is that accurate?
Yes. And, I was basically consuming cannabis for wellness, and that's why I created a vape to have a healthier delivery mechanism for cannabis. But so I kind of think of it one as the same. It's just that instead of inventing devices now, I'm just sharing mental models and different things of that nature.
There you go. And you're a coach, am I right?
Yes, I teach mindset and meditation, and I do a little bit of manifestation on the side as well.
Well, I could use all three of those M's at some point. We'll chat. we'll chat. We'll
Hey,
chat
real
after.
quick, Jimmy, because I want to ask about his exit. Do you
Go
have any
ahead.
advice, Seibo, on how to get capital? Like, you started your company, you got some investment capital. How did you do it? Do you have any advice on how to do that? And can you talk a little bit about, an exit that you had?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess serendipitously or synchronistically, Arcview is here. So, to raise capital, this was back in 2015. I joined Arcview and did the pitch event there. And by winning Arcview, that was like such like a huge thing at the time, to be able to just go to investors and let them know that we're a past Arcview winner and these are our credentials and things of that nature. And I got so many different conversations out of that, and it really helped us jump out of the gates, because at that time I was pitching a $600 desktop vaporizer, and vape pens were just becoming very popular. So I don't think that without winning the pitch event, it would have been easy for me to raise capital. Now, as far as an exit goes, that part I have less to talk about, in that I stepped down from running the company. I was just getting a little bit too burnt out. Coincidentally, my second daughter was born the day I was pitching at Arcview. So, there was like this very crisp memory in my mind of like when my cannabis career got started was the same day my second daughter was born. So over the course of the last 5 years, like trying to be a father as well as being an entrepreneur in a rapidly changing environment, like it was hard for me to be the best CEO or be the best father. And I had to make a choice, which was to be the best father. So the company is still going on right now. We haven't had an exit, but we have had other people ask to buy some of our intellectual property. So we're currently going through that process right now. So to be determined on how the exit went. But my advice would be always, to the best of your ability, be your authentic self. When investors are pushing back, when investors are telling you to do things that are against your own intuition, just trust yourself. Because, being a lifelong cannabis user, I've listened to advice from some investors that told me to change the product, and it was always disastrous, and it was always to appease them. So my one word of advice as a coach now, or just not as a coach, just giving free advice, is to really trust yourself. Because I look at entrepreneurship as a spiritual journey, one where you will discover more about yourself than literally, maybe only parenting has been a more eye-opening journey for me. But between the two, like being able to really trust yourself and understand that if you make a mistake, that was your mistake to learn, and not to bend to the will of the investors or the people that are funding your company. Because it's always important to keep them happy and to have gratitude for the money that they put in. But you're the expert that they bet on, so remain the expert.
Oh man, that is great advice.
That was great.
You have no idea how much that hit home with me in so many ways. And Scott, I'm watching you in the Zoom room, and I'm watching you, nod your head, and I see some beautiful children behind you. So I'm guessing you understand the challenges of being a parent as well, right?
These are just 3 of them. I have another little one too. So I know firsthand being a parent, as well as being an entrepreneur, and the ups and downs, I think they're just almost more exaggerated. And so the challenges you have to face and, maintain a positive attitude for those around you, is a lot. So cannabis is something that's helped me, greatly through that as well. And, being a part of the industry and making it more broadly is part of my mission.
Fantastic. And I can tell you, as an entrepreneur who's made a lot of mistakes, I'm the smartest guy in the room because of it. Okay. No, I'm not even close. I'm very self-aware. I get it. And it has been the most challenging time of my life in so many ways. I started Scott, you guys are all laugh about this. 2008. You remember when the entire world's economy got cut in half, right?
Sure.
That was the first weekend I opened my first business. This is my second business. Okay.
Wow.
My dad always said, "You never make it easy, do you?" And I go, "Nope, I haven't made it easy." And I have found a home in media, which is where I've been for the most of my career. But being in media in the cannabis space is double challenging, let's just say, because nobody likes you pretty much. And you mentioned the stigma. I mean, even at the bar last night, I had a dinner at a bar, and I was dealing with 2 strangers on either side of me. And as soon as I mentioned the word cannabis, the conversation stopped. And that's in a legal state in Massachusetts. This is it's still here. And it's all about education. They had no idea what that, they figured, oh man, you must be a stoner. And I'm like, I'm really not. Okay. I mean, am I a medical patient? Yes, I am. Do I use it medicinally? Yes, I do. Am I trying to be responsible in my use? 100%. In fact, it was Steve D'Angelo's Cannabis Manifesto book. When I read that, I said, that's exactly how I view this plant medicine. It really hit home with me. And of course, he's one of the founders of Arcview that's having a big conference this week in New York City. Sarah, I look forward to seeing you there.
Yes. So
all right. I really do. I think that'll be a lot of fun. And Scott, I really enjoyed listening to you as well, sir. And thank you so much for joining us here on Green Rush Live for at least a few minutes anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll be on a panel on Thursday on M&A preparing for the exit. So we can talk about that then more too.
Well, I'm prepared for the M, not necessarily the exit yet, but we can certainly talk, and I'll be listening and taking good notes. And I look forward to that. In fact, Scott, I'd love to set up a time where the two of us can just sit down and have another conversation one-on-one for my the next show, because I'm always seem to be producing the next piece of content, the next thing. And Sarah, I looking forward to seeing you. And Seibo, great to talk with you. I'm glad you made it. And Josh is the one who delivered you. So I hope you won't be a stranger to us. I hope you'll like, share, and subscribe.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I actually signed on. I was supposed to sign on at 2 p.m. Someone told me to sign on at 1:30. So I apologize if I came on at the wrong time.
Yeah, well, it's just look, I'm in East Coast time, so I don't have a clue of what time it is in Pacific time. But I do know this, it's the top of the hour. We're going to take a break. I want to thank Sarah and Seibo and also Scott for joining us. We're going to have a whole new panel. And if Jeff Finkle gets off his plane in time, he'll be joining us as well to continue to preview the Arcview live in New York City investment conference coming up next week. Don't go away.
It's the whole package. Not only is it the exclusion, we talked earlier about how experienced is the rep you're talking with. Do they do it full time? Do they do it 5% of the time? Do they have a dedicated back office? How long they've been doing it? There's a lot of people trying to cash in the insurance. The forefathers, like my company, we've been doing it for 3 years and now they're trying to cash in. That's okay. We like competition, but we know that we're going to come out on top most of the time.
We've got breaking news for all farmers and growers out there. How would you like to defer the taxes you pay on your grow? Now you can legally, thanks to a discovery by agricultural tax attorney Michael Berwick of the law firm Greenspoon Martyr.
I have been working with tax deferral for 20 years, and my team at Greenspoon Martyr in the tax area got together with our team in the cannabis area. And putting our heads together collectively, we have determined that this major tax deferral clause includes the growing of cannabis.
Now, don't think that this is a new tax code clause because it's been around for over a century.
Absolutely. This provision's been around for over 100 years. It was designed for agriculture. It was put in force at a time when we had a much more agrarian economy, big lobby for agriculture and farming, and that definition of agriculture has grown and expanded over the years. And again, it now includes cannabis.
How does it work?
Essentially, it will allow the taxpayer, if done correctly through us, it will allow the taxpayer to defer all state and federal ordinary income taxes for 30 years.
To find out more and see if you qualify as a grower, contact Michael Berwick at 305-789-2761 or call toll-free 888-491-1120 and ask for Michael Berwick's office, or just email him at michael.berwick, that's BURWICK @gmlaw.com.
Hey,
You want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Welcome back to the final hour of Green Rush Live for a Friday afternoon. This is one of our really live shows as opposed to our 24/7 live stream that we run Monday through Sunday now, 24/7 on Pro Cannabis Media and our Roku and Apple channels, PCM TV. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of Green Rush Live, our regularly scheduled business of cannabis talk show here on Friday afternoons. And joining us is my pal from Washington State. His name is Josh Kincaid. He also hosts the Talking Hedge podcast out there in Washington State. He's also a valued member of our Weed Talk news team that will be following this really live show at 6 o'clock. We will be running our weekly news show anchored by Elena Pinto. And if you guys haven't seen our weekly news show, as someone who's grown up in newsrooms for 30 years, I'm amazed at how really cool what the job that we're doing now and the contributions we're getting from all of our correspondents all over the country and internationally as well. It's worth watching, and it gives you a real good feel for the temperature of the end of prohibition from coast to coast in the United States of America. But we want to welcome in our guest this particular period of time on our show. One is an old friend of mine, someone who's a regular on this show, Jeff Finkle, the CEO of Arcview. Hello, Jeffrey. You got to unmute yourself. I know you're in a car.
Jimmy. Yeah, I'm in a cab, so I was trying to spare everybody the background noise.
Oh, no.
But good to see you, and thank you for having me again.
No, and also we've been doing, I think, yeoman's work on previewing your big event in New York City this week with both people that have had successful runs, pitches with Arcview, and even had a successful exit. And of course, some of the speakers that'll be in New York City this week coming up for that conference as well. So it's been, I think, a pretty good preview show. David Hess is also with us, and I believe you know David. Am I right?
I do. David knows this. He's one of my favorite people in this industry, and glad to be sharing the mic with him today.
Yeah, and David, you're quite the story as a career entrepreneur, but also one of the things that always flips me out when I read people's bios is you're a two-time cancer survivor. Am I right?
Absolutely, Jimmy. Yeah, and cannabis had played a tremendous role in my recovery and still does today.
And I can't tell you, I've been doing over 300 interviews in the last few years here, how many times all of us in this business have heard these kinds of stories that cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life, and those that still get into the business because of that experience. So is that the motivating factor for you?
It's what drives me, but as we'll probably discover through the interview, I'm originally from Southern California, where we legalized back in 1996. So for myself and my family, we actually started getting into the business of cannabis fairly early. But what drives my passion at a much deeper level is certainly the impact that cannabis had on me as a patient, and my personal, anecdotes that I've been speaking with other patients that have survived over the years with the help of cannabis as well, getting them through chemo and then beyond.
Yeah, fantastic, and a lot of respect. You're running Tress Capital now, accurate?
Accurate, yes.
And how is the investment community right now for the cannabis space? Because we've had differing, not opinions, but observations about what's going on in the world of capital investment in cannabis.
Well, you picked a good week to have me on because it's a positive week, right? We've got all this optimism post our president's remarks about cannabis prisoners, and certainly it's only a first step right? And hopefully we're going to see a lot more with regards to, at the state level, where we actually have most of the prisoners, right, cannabis prisoners today, but also in rescheduling or possibly descheduling of cannabis at a federal level, which is very exciting because that also has ramifications with banks and all kinds of other things. So that's very exciting. And as far as investment goes, well, first of all, that raised the market about 30-40% on Biden's news. So we're all very excited about that. But obviously for the long run, we're undeterred by these ups and downs. It happens with all startups, as I'm sure Jeff can tell you. But our industry is sort of a startup, even though we've been here for a long time. These are just the bumps and bruises and growing pains of an industry. But we're very optimistic and very bullish long term for sure.
Fantastic. And alongside is a buddy of yours, Eugenio Garcia. Did I do it right?
That's right, Jimmy.
Thank goodness. The co-founder and publisher of Cannabis Now Media. By the way, I subscribe to your newsletters. I follow, I like, I share and all that neat stuff. And I really appreciate you taking the time. I had no idea we'd have a media person on with us today, but you are always welcome because, as you know, media takes a lot of abuse these days. Don't media companies?
It depends which media company.
Fair enough. Tell us about how you got into this and how is it going with Cannabis Now Media?
Thank you, Jimmy. I got into cannabis back in 1995 when I was in 8th grade and enjoyed cannabis all through high school in moderation and through college, and became a political science graduate in university. And Montana, which is where I grew up. I was born in Los Angeles, but grew up in Montana. Montana legalized for medical purposes in 2004. So I think we were the 7th or 8th state for medical. And my brother-in-law's little brother, who was one of my best friends growing up, he started to be a provider here in Montana, is what they called them. And one day we came up with the idea to start a medical journal for cannabis enthusiasts. And that snowballed into a national magazine that's consumer focused and for the enlightened cannabis consumer. And it's been a wild ride the last 12 years.
Enlightenment is another word of educating the public, those that are not familiar with the product, if you will, as much as many people are in this industry. I've always found that this is exactly one of the reasons why I started this company, was to give a voice to the industry so that they could come onto a media environment and not be attacked because it's one of the things I saw when I watched one of the first interviews, probably 5-6 years ago on CNBC, and a reporter showed up and started grilling this CEO, unnamed company, about, the gateway theory and what about the kids and all the myths that have been out there for years and years that have pretty much been debunked by a lot of research and study. And even in more mature states like Josh's Washington or in Colorado, we've actually seen teen use go down as soon as it becomes legal and not something that the kids have to sneak, if you will. They're learning by listening and watching their parents learn and use this product in a positive, responsible manner. So to me, it was one of those things I looked at and I said, I know I could do a better interview than that person, and said, I'm just going to start doing these podcasts. I was encouraged, and here we are, something like in 2 years, we've got about 10,600 subscribers on YouTube, and we've had well over 670,000 views of our videos. So I think we've done pretty well in an organic place right now. Obviously, we're looking to grow this and connect both coasts, and being a news guy, this is something that I am pretty passionate about. So it's really a pleasure to talk to a fellow media baron, if you will. Have you ever been called a media baron before?
I've never been called a baron. I've been called a mogul incorrectly, but I will say, Jimmy, what's interesting about this group is not only is Cannabis Now a portfolio company of Tress Capital, and David and I have been in the trenches for a number of years now in the cannabis space, but actually the Arcview group was the first platform that, as an entrepreneur, I pitched to for capital. I believe it was 2000. It must have been like 2015 or something like that, 16 maybe. And the very first time as an entrepreneur that I ever pitched asking for capital was through an Arcview group Zoom, or it was a Skype back then. And the first time I ever pitched in person was at an Arcview Las Vegas event at a pitch competition. So Arcview was my first introduction into raising capital as an entrepreneur. And fast forward now to 2022, not only are we a media company, but we're also a agency and consulting company. So given the amount of time we've been in the game, now our clients are coming to us not only for marketing, but also for solutions. And in the last year, a lot of the need has been, hey, help me raise capital, help me be connected with people who are investing in cannabis. So I love the opportunity to engage in this conversation from that perspective.
Do you have any best practices on like how you got capital for anybody else listening and wanting to do the same thing?
How best practices?
Any advice?
How much time do we have, Josh?
A few minutes.
We got quite a few. Go ahead.
I mean, look, high level from an entrepreneur's desk, I would say that there is a certain amount of luck and just what I call magic that happens that you cannot discount. Like I went to where I met Tress Capital. I had spent 48 hours at a New York City event, Cannabis World Congress and Expo, I believe it was. And I had spent, I had my checklist and every single booth and all my meetings. And for 48 hours, I was running around crazy trying to meet the right people and do all this aggressive stuff. And none of it worked out. And I saw David and his partner Asher standing at the bottom of the escalator. I was walking out. I was about to fly out. Might have had my last magazine in my hand. And I saw his T-shirt, Tress Capital. I said, "You get my last magazine. Let's connect. I got to catch my flight." And they were my first investors. So that's a little bit of luck. But to be more straightforward with your question, preparing for raising capital is the most important thing. Having your financial plan, having your books in order, being very, very clear on your mission, what your product is, and all that's very challenging, especially early days. You have no money, you have no vision. All you know is you got a dream. And so I think that that might be like step 2 and 3. Step 1 might actually be know who you want to be in business with, because who you take money from, it's like a marriage. And you're going to be with these guys and ladies maybe for 5, 10, 20 years. And they're vetting you is normally how entrepreneurs see it. Like they're doing diligence on you, but it really should be a relationship, and only take money from the right people who have the right values, the right mission, who can support you more than just writing a check. I think that'd be my number 1 advice to any entrepreneurs out there.
I'm going to take that to heart, because that's exactly how I feel about who I'd like to work with, because I know I'm very self-aware of my strengths and my weaknesses, and Jeff Finkle knows them very well. In fact, Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of these other success stories, because now this is the second person that we've had on, and this was not planned, who spoke about the same thing. They pitched at an Arcview event that helped them get their funding, and here they are, either have exited or in the middle of an exit, or they're flourishing. Have you ever thought, Jeff, about actually putting together a show or even testimonials of all these people that are out there that Arcview has helped?
You know, boy, there are a lot out there. Here's the statistic that we use. Over a 10-year period, so Arcview was founded in 2010, I think we're trying to actually come up with the actual number. We've done between 40 and 50 investor conferences. And over that period of time, some 350 million has found its way to over 250 companies initiated Arcview events. Now, today, in a world where there are lots of debt capital around for the large public MSOs, that may not sound like a very big number. I mean, some large debt deals that the public MSOs are raising are over, $75, $100 million. But during that period of time, I would say that was the majority of the equity financing that landed into the hands of operators in the industry. So, I'm not. I wasn't an Arcviewer in those early years. I really engaged late 2018. Started the venture practice with them in the beginning of 20 and became CEO last year. So I don't have that lineage and history to go through each success story. But the impact that Arcview's had as being really a company that facilitated economic growth and capital reaching entrepreneurs in the industry is fairly significant.
Yeah. What's the most important thing, Jeff? I mean, I remember asking you this question a few years ago, and you said the team, the people that you bring to the table to work with you. Is that still accurate?
You know, I sometimes are on the other side of this argument. Team is important. I think in cannabis, team is very important. But if I look across my history of investing in tech, timing is a little bit more important, right? So what's the analogy? Remember Friendster? Remember MySpace? Right? Those were early platforms for social media. But why was it that Facebook took off? Right? Why was it that Facebook wasn't really like pushing the boulder up a hill? It started as, Mark Zuckerberg at Harvard wanted to find a place to, a way in which to catalog good-looking women, right? And now every 40, 50-year-old lives their life publicly on Facebook. So timing has a lot to do with it. And I would argue more to do with it than team. Now, that doesn't underscore the importance of team. And timing is a little bit less amorphous as we think about cannabis, because states put out RFPs and then you respond to the RFPs and you raise money. And that's sort of, the timing is sort of organized for you. But in tech, or I would say even in the ancillary side of cannabis, timing might be more important than team, but team is extremely important.
Well, we've already heard a great example about timing. David, as you look at opportunities that are out there, what is the one thing you look for, or is there a multiple of things that you look for?
Certainly a multiple, and timing is what Jeff said, and certainly there's luck, as Eugenio had mentioned. For us, our common denominator is impact. We want to be, and it's a wide range when I say impact, but it's still, as I mentioned, early days of cannabis, and if we're going to be allocating all this capital, especially on the private side, we wanted to ensure that we're supporting what we feel are the legs of the industry, right? And Eugenio was modest, but in driving this new normalization of cannabis, it is critical that one be able to walk through JFK and walk into Hudson News, and right there next to People magazine or any other magazine is Cannabis Now, right? And the fact that you can do that, I can't understate that enough. What an impact that has on our industry, what an impact that has, globally for cannabis. It's not hush hush anymore. Like you see still some of the other magazines that they have these covers over it. That's not what cannabis is, and it's not next to guns and ammo. It's right there in the open. And so that says a lot. And so impact is certainly, whether it's making sure that if you're cultivating cannabis, you're doing so using data and just really maximizing your efficiency, or lab testing or media, right? It's the legs of the industry, and being impactful up and down is where we, that's that first box that has to be checked for us. Yeah.
Where are you seeing the deal flow right now, Dave? Is it based on either like location or sector, or like where's it at?
Definitely location is big, and we're seeing a lot on the East Coast right now. I think that's where a lot of, it's time to shine right now. Certainly in New York and New Jersey, we're seeing a ton of deal flow. We're seeing a lot of international deal flow as well. In fact, there's also a cannabis conference coming up in Mexico right now, and Latin America is becoming big. I just came back from Israel. They've been doing research on the pharma side, and it's certainly a lot coming out of Israel. And when you have these EU GMP facilities, whether it be in Israel, Malta, or some other places, that becomes a launching pad into Europe for a lot of these brands here in the States. And so what we're seeing is a lot of consolidation. We're seeing a lot of groups working together on really maximizing efficiency and maximizing their dollars, their capital, because obviously there's a certain amount that goes around. Not everybody is going to get funded regardless of the jockey, and that goes back to timing and certainly luck. But there's money that is definitely being funded right now into deal flow. Absolutely.
Is it the ancillary related companies that investors are looking at even more seriously than the plant touching ones? Or
it used to be more that way, right? Now that we're, especially here, President Biden even just talking freely about cannabis, and anytime I get my news feed, I mean, I'm in the industry, so a lot of my news feed happens to be cannabis, but you see, your New York Times, Forbes, just writing about cannabis weekly at this point. And it's, become normal. So now it used to be, you were either plant touching or you weren't, right? And that was like the first question we would receive as investors. Well, do you touch the plant? And nowadays it's, I don't hear that as much, especially from investors. Oh no, we don't want to touch the plant. Now, especially in places like New York, that's the first thing that they run to. And not to say that there aren't ancillary opportunities. There certainly are. We're looking at a few now, and we're looking at them very seriously. You've had quite a few years, where some of those businesses, they exist, right? And it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be competitors, but a lot of those ancillary companies have had a decade, right, to get off the ground. So you really are seeing a lot of plant touching opportunities. So if you're not interested in touching the plant just yet, you're gonna not see. You'll be limited in the deal flow you're looking at, certainly, but there's plenty to look at from both sides. But certainly, it's weighted on licensed opportunities for sure.
There's a lot of licenses being sold out there right now. A lot of people get in, they get their license, and then they realize they don't have the capital to move forward, and they have to find capital. And sometimes they're being taken advantage of in many ways. Are we still seeing that happening in some of the states like Oklahoma, even in Massachusetts? I've heard some stories.
Oh yeah, and I was speaking with someone today also. You're also competing with the illicit market, right? And so you've got this very interesting dynamic. You've got, let's take a place like Nevada, for example, where, or California, where you've got tremendous amount of dispensaries and licensed cultivation, but you also have, numbers like 70-80% of cannabis still being purchased on the illicit market. So what some of the bigger multi-state operators or bigger operators in general that are able to do it is they're bringing their prices down to rock bottom, where we're talking, it used to be $300 to $400 for an ounce of cannabis at a dispensary. Nevada, there's billboards everywhere advertising $30 ounces, right? And so if you're able to bring that down to $30, you're knocking out majority of your competition when it's 500, at the very least, to $1,200 to produce a pound of cannabis, and 16 ounces in a pound. You do the math, you're losing money at $30 an ounce, right? But these bigger companies, they recognize that's their way to drive out the illicit market and their smaller competitors. So we're seeing a lot of that, and you're absolutely right. If you're going to compete, I think as a brand, you have to come with a built-in community, and that's also why media is critical for a brand to build itself. It's not good enough to come out with amazing product, right? And what that means in the cannabis world potentially is a new exotic strain, or a strain that works particular to some effect, or has great shelf appeal. That's not going to cut it anymore. And just because you've got a cool looking brand, if you're in New York, that certainly doesn't work, because they've got limits on what your brand can even look like. And it's going to certainly in the beginning look more like the Canadian packaging and be very sterile. So it's the community that you have to be bringing with you as a brand, that's really going to be purchasing from your brand regardless of the strain you put forward, because they trust you. And without groups like Cannabis Now and yourselves putting that forward, you don't have that as a brand because you can't use traditional media, and not everybody gets to be on Jimmy Kimmel at night advertising, their edibles because they're Mike Tyson, right? So, you really need to build a brand with your community in the space through loyalty and through other things that really touch the consumer. And that can only be done, with groups like yourselves and other media channels in the space. So that, those opportunities to get behind, those ancillary businesses are there and are still critical. Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to get Eugenio. Did I say that right? It's really, yes, Eugenio? Yeah, I want to get your feeling about what David just talked about with the advertising thing, because I did happen to see our Vermont news this week. Vermont, as you know, just opened up their adult use market, and the marketing and advertising restrictions in that market are extremely difficult to deal with. And as someone who's been in this space now for, gosh, you said 2015, 7 years, how are you doing as far as that goes? And are people still seeking you out to share the marketing dollars that they have? Eugenio?
Unmute.
Thank
Oh, he's
you.
on mute.
Jimmy, just a little love for the PCM community. We have almost 4 million social media followers through our combined platforms. And I did just post this podcast on our Facebook page. So hopefully you get a few more viewers from.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We don't put a lot of money or even thought in pushing things out onto Facebook. We do have an Instagram page. We do have a Twitter page, but I'm not a big fan of social media. I'm old school. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm middle school, so I threw it up there for you, and hopefully some more people from Cannabis Now community is watching.
Appreciate it. I really appreciate that.
I think there's two main categories right now that I believe are going to be the future of cannabis. One is the consumer brand, for lack of a better word, recreational or therapeutic market. And then the pharmaceutical market is the other half of it, which is so virgin and so new. I almost can't even speak to it beyond just a gut feeling that I think cannabinoids will have major medical impact 20, 30, 10 years to come. And that is going to be a whole different game. God willing, instead of seeing 80% of CNN's advertising and commercials be opioid-based pharmaceuticals, it will be 30 to 40% cannabinoid-based pharmaceuticals, because that's maybe the future of pharmaceuticals. But I won't speak to that in this moment, just because beyond a gut feeling, I don't have the evidence yet. Yeah. But as far as brands go, for a long time I said, look, we can't look at this like the alcohol industry, because alcohol is so damaging, and kind of like cigarettes and alcohol, it can kill you if you overindulge in it or indulge at all in it, like cigarettes. But with cannabis, it very much is a branding game. And people who are spending money, they're spending money specifically if they understand what their brand is and what they're trying to communicate to the market. And what I've seen an explosion in coming out of COVID has been experiential marketing to mainstream consumers. And what that means is a lot of in-person events, like micro events or festivals or events for the end consumer, or embedding cannabis into mainstream events, whether it's Bottle Rock concert in Napa or other. I believe the California State Fair had a huge cannabis activation. Coachella. That's where I've seen a lot of money being spent in the last 12 months, as opposed to traditional endemic cannabis spending.
Right. Hey, I just was at a 3-day event in Massachusetts that featured the Whalers. And I'm not talking about the Hartford Whalers. I'm talking about, used to be Bob Marley but these are the Whalers, and they played pretty much my entire playlist in their concert. I do see a very good friend and someone we have a lot of respect for, and has a show on our live stream. Dr. Mary Clifton has joined us in the Zoom room, and I want to get to Dr. Mary, but I'm going to tease this. We're going to take a break here. And when we come back, I want to get everybody's feeling about the next wave of plant medicine. And are we getting away from focusing on cannabis and morphing over to the psilocybin world? And we'll talk about that coming back with more of Green Rush Live after this. Don't go away.
It's the whole package. Not only is it the exclusion, we talked earlier about how experienced is your rep you're talking with. Do they do it full time? Do they do it 5% of the time? Do they have a dedicated back office? How long they've been doing it? There's a lot of people trying to cash in the insurance. The forefathers, like my company, we've been doing it for 3 years and now they're trying to cash in. That's okay. We like competition, but we know that we're going to come out on top most of the time.
Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information.
We've got breaking news for all farmers and growers out there. How would you like to defer the taxes you pay on your grow? Now you can legally, thanks to a discovery by agricultural tax attorney Michael Berwick of the law firm Greenspoon Martyr.
I have been working with tax deferral for 20 years, and my team at Greenspoon Martyr in the tax area got together with our team in the cannabis area. And putting our heads together collectively, we have determined that this major tax deferral clause includes the growing of cannabis.
Now, don't think that this is a new tax code clause because it's been around for over a century.
Absolutely. This provision's been around for over 100 years. It applies. It was designed for agriculture. It was put in force at a time when we had a much more agrarian economy, big lobby for agriculture and farming, and that definition of agriculture has grown and expanded over the years. And again, it now includes cannabis.
How does it work?
Essentially, it will allow the taxpayer, if done correctly through us, it will allow the taxpayer to defer all state and federal ordinary income taxes for 30 years.
To find out more and see if you qualify as a grower, contact Michael Berwick at 305-789-2761 or call toll-free 888-491-1120 and ask for Michael Berwick's office, or just email him at michael.berwick, that's BURWICK, at gmlaw.com. All right, welcome back to the final half hour of Green Rush Live, our really live business of cannabis talk show that we do every Friday afternoon here on the Pro Cannabis Media Network, on Roku and Apple TV channel PCM TV, our website Pro Cannabis Media that you can now find. I think we actually launched the new landing page, but I'm not 100% sure yet. If it didn't launch today, it's going to launch next week, that's for sure. And we also want to welcome in a friend. Dr. Mary Clifton is with us, and Dr. Mary is going to be at the Arcview Investment Conference coming up this week. Dr. Mary, what are you going to be talking about?
I'm going to talk about all of the new alternative and plant medicines. My talk is titled "The One Thing You Need to Know Before You Prescribe Alternative and Medicines."
That's good. I like that, and I'll be taking good notes. I promise you that. For sure on that. And one of the newest movements, if you will, in this country is towards the acceptance and embracing of psilocybin, the mushrooms, if you will. The question I have, and I want everybody to, kind of chime in on this opinion of mine, is I think the industry is making a mistake. I think that we should get cannabis accepted first before we move on to another plant medicine. Dr. Mary, what's your feeling about that? Go ahead.
Oh, I feel like you should do everything at once. There's so much powerful plant and alternative medicine coming out between the cannabis and psilocybin and ketamine, and they all have a different position. You know, for many people, anxiety and depression and insomnia and chronic pain can be managed with cannabis, and for others, you know, more intense therapy needs to be used. And cannabis doesn't necessarily have a great place in alcohol addiction treatment. I think that the high is different enough that it doesn't really suit most alcoholics. But there's a great new study looking at two psilocybin treatments leading to a reduction in a severe alcoholism where people are drinking more than 7 to 10 drinks a day, going all the way down to 1 to 2 drinks a day after just 2 rounds of psilocybin treatment. So I think that we have to find the niches for all of these products, and always focus on safety and quality of the product, and so that the consumer feels confident.
Yeah, that is so true. I want to ask Jeff and David about the investment community. How are they looking at psilocybin as an investment?
Well, I was going to say, Jimmy, it's not one industry, right? So, to your initial comment, what the industry, there's different competing interests, right? And so not only are, the psychedelic business is going to be largely a pharma opportunity. Companies were able to access the public markets earlier. There's more institutional capital in that side of the business than there is in cannabis. So I think that they're very different. And, Mary can sort of wax poetically about all of the different mental health indications that ketamine, psilocybin, DMT all are indicated for. Not exactly the case in cannabis. Cannabis has this whole consumer market that psychedelics doesn't have, and a whole ancillary piece in the middle that psychedelics don't have. When you think of testing for cannabis, these are native industries that grew up around cannabis to support it. But on the psychedelic side, the pharma infrastructure is going to be in play. So as far as for me as an investor, for what I've at least seen for some of the private funds, the investment in psychedelics is either on the clinical delivery side or on the drug discovery side. Whereas in cannabis, there's really 12 different subsectors, some that had to grow up to support cannabis, certainly, and some that are, more consumer facing and more sort of serving the business of cannabis. So they're just very different profiles of products and industry.
David, do you concur with Jeff on that?
100%. It's echo everyone's comments on the panel. They're completely different channels, but where they are, where the parallels are that it's wellness, right? And it's an alternative wellness to, some of the more traditional solutions that, maybe for the past 2-3 decades, maybe longer, we've been used to. And it's more, I think, of an acceptance to getting back to Eastern philosophy, and instead of knowing the exact dose, right, of a Tylenol when every time I have a headache, and that being the only way that I can solve my headache, right? Really not even understanding what the Tylenol is doing to my body and other things. Maybe there's other alternatives. I can, infuse my tea with this plant, and that will help me, right? So I think we're as a culture and as a society where we've embraced plant medicine more, and that probably could be contributed to cannabis sort of breaking the ice as a wellness. But to Jeff's point as well, when Sanjay Gupta came out with weed episodes, right, 1, 2, and 3, I think that was game changing, and him coming out and apologizing and saying, we had it wrong this entire time. As the medical community, there is efficacy to cannabis, and profiling Charlotte, right? What that did, it was a great service to, I think, the cannabis community on a whole, and in the investment community on whole, because it brought, it highlighted the medical efficacy cannabis can have. The disservice that it did is it sort of muddled the waters a little bit between the different channels that there are in our industry, and the adult use side and the pharma side really are apples and oranges. I mean, you're not going to have a pharmaceutical company, including, for the most part, right? I mean, we know what GW is doing, but they're not going to be at scale producing their cannabinoids. And Dr. Mary probably has a better insight than me, but they're not going to be producing their cannabinoids from phytocannabinoids as much as they'll be doing so through a petri dish in a lab in 3 days at a fraction of the cost. But that doesn't necessarily, mean that they're, some of these major billion-dollar adult use brands aren't going, are going to cease to exist and aren't going to be built. They will. As Jeff mentioned, there's a culture that's surrounding this economy when it comes to adult use cannabis that a lot of these brands and entertainers and celebrities are beginning to tap into. But right, that's not going to appear on the shelf of CVS the same way some other cannabinoids will. And when it comes to psilocybin and some of the other plant medicines that we're seeing, as Dr. Mary mentioned, there are some areas that cannabis might not be the best for, whether it's alcoholism, schizophrenia, or some other things. When it comes to cannabis, it's well suited for psilocybin. I have personal experience with that, especially as somebody that's coming off of cancer and everything that not only pain, PTSD, anxiety, all these things that come with being a cancer patient. I've benefited tremendously from plant medicines, right, where I didn't have to turn to some of the opiates that the doctors just kind of hand you without even really thinking about it. So yes, there's acceptance. Personally, we've had an exit of one of our companies into a plant wellness company that is public today. That they're all into psychedelics, WISA. So we're all for it, and we're excited to learn more, both from an impact standpoint. Like I said, that's really what we're about. We're impact investors, and cannabis is the industry that we've chosen to do that with right now. But certainly wellness as a whole, it plays a large part of that and will be meaningful and critical to come.
Yeah, so as we know, the president talked about moving forward and having the Health and Human Services Director start looking into the descheduling or rescheduling of cannabis. And one of the biggest fears of the industry is that big pharma is going to take control. Dr. Mary, as someone who has an MD, you understand the role that the pharmaceutical world plays in our society. Is this a reality, or what would you like to see the federal government come up with a plan for the proper scheduling of cannabis? Dr. Mary, is she still with us? Are you muted? Are you muted, Dr. Mary?
Oh, I'm sorry. I muted myself. I've unmuted myself.
People have been trying to mute me for generations, right, Jeff? Anyway, go ahead.
As far as the pharmaceutical industry entering cannabis and psilocybin, I think cannabis really has gone about it the wrong way. I mean, to start out with medical and then to go into recreational and have it legal in one state and not legal across that state line, and so many people imprisoned for such a safe plant. The sooner that we can deschedule cannabis and quit trying to, when we're talking about it being a drug like heroin or LSD or fentanyl, and start thinking about it more along the lines of the completely safe and effective product that it is for medicinal or recreational purposes. But I think that's why the psilocybin community is, or the push for psilocybin is coming through big pharma rather than I mean, they're not going to go through this crazy route that cannabis did. They're just going to identify the product, do the testing on it, and then launch it as a pharmaceutical. And that's a stepwise pattern that's very well established, and the government likes it, and the FDA likes it. I mean, it's easier because the psilocybin is one molecule, you know, and they've been able to take the molecule out and replicate it on an E. coli medium. They the researchers at oh, doggone it, I can't remember the name of the college where they did it, but they pulled the molecule and put it on a E. coli bacteria so that you can multiply it very, very easily. And they get a very consistent dose that way. It's not extracted from the plant, and then the extractions have different percentages. So then it can flow very much like a single molecule drug development. Whereas if you're trying to work with cannabis, you know, you've got 88 different phytonutrients in every inhalation. I mean, which one is doing what, or what relationship with each of these particular things? That's something that is very difficult for the FDA to handle. They don't really understand how to handle multiple drugs in one administration. So psilocybin is really well placed to launch very successfully with big pharma. And that would be okay with me. I you know, there's always going to be another you know, sort of underground realm for mushrooms, but there's also a lot of people who are never going to go that route, but would really benefit from it. You know, people with end stage short life expectancy with a lot of anxiety. It seems to work beautifully there. It works well with some resistant depression. So I don't think those people are going to seek out an underground source for a mushroom and take it that way. A lot of them won't. So this opens up that product to a whole new market where we can really help people.
Yeah. Was it Johns Hopkins by any chance, the college you're thinking of?
I think it was, yeah, in Baltimore. Mm-hmm.
I read a lot. I read a lot of stuff like that.
Johns Hopkins horn, because my word, they're always. Have you ever met a doctor from Johns Hopkins? I mean, it's like meeting a vegan. They tell you it within 5 minutes and over again. So
Meeting a vegan? Did I hear you just slam the whole vegan community? Come on.
Well, I mean, I'm vegan most of the time.
Yeah, so it's a superior diet. It's a superior diet. I just don't want to do it.
Wait, they'll tell you. Yeah. When I was at Johns Hopkins, all the doctors, is hilarious. So,
I do want to bring in Eugenio again because I want to talk to him about media, and I want to talk to him about traditional media versus cannabis media, and some of the challenges that we face. And one of them, it actually was a perfect example of it over the last few weeks. There was a death at a True Leaf manufacturing facility. I believe a worker inhaled fumes and had an allergic reaction to it. And this became a story. Now, we all know that in other industries, there are other examples of this happening and nobody notices it. But in cannabis, when something like that happens, it does tend to take on a life of its own. How do you balance the editorial side of things in your magazine and your publications? Because it is a challenge, isn't it?
It absolutely is a challenge. And I think where we have been able to successfully differentiate ourselves is in the endemic space, which is all cannabis media. It's very challenging with such a small market. It's very challenging to have journalism that doesn't lean towards the marketing or the client's perspective. And very often in endemic markets, not just cannabis, but in endemic markets, you'll find that a lot of the content being produced is very sided towards making the marketing clients look good, feel good, etc. And you get very little true journalism. Now, 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot of mainstream media talking about cannabis. There was only the endemic media within cannabis talking about cannabis. Now, every single newspaper, website, CNN, Fox is part of their beat is talking about cannabis, which makes it even more important that when Cannabis Now speaks or some of the other good cannabis platforms, we're very, very careful about, if we're going to be talking about a client who has been paying us, we market as sponsored content. And that's very clear. If it's something that we do not contact any monetary benefit, then that's true journalism, and it's vetted through the writer and the editorial staff to make sure that it's authentic. And I've killed a lot of stories that we haven't been able to corroborate whether it's true or accurate, and we just don't publish it. We don't publish it early or first to get all of the eyeballs, because we don't know if it's true and how accurate it is.
Right. That's a refreshing, actually, hearing that, to be honest with you, because that separation of church and state journalism and advertorial has kind of evolved negatively in traditional media. And you're right. When you come right out and you say, hey, look, this is sponsored content, but industry supported content is actually a wave of new media. And we're starting to see that in the over-the-top television world, the connected TV world. There's plenty of websites out there now that are being controlled by industry for content. Is that something that you've noticed as well?
It's actually been at the top of my mind for the last 2 years,
right.
Specifically saying to myself, how interested are individuals that love cannabis and use it on a daily basis? What is their threshold of appetite for cannabis-centric content? And and answering that question is the key to future cannabis media longevity. And I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is that brands and cannabis companies, they are going to have to find out how to communicate to that consumer. And I think that there is a place for cannabis industry media, but I think the larger opportunity is the in-between of how does the brand reach the consumer wherever they are. And so whether that's the marketing management company, it's the cannabis agency, it's the PR communications company, that in-between conduit, that's actually going to be the largest revenue driver in between the media conversation, I think, in the next 10 years.
Wow.
Just to add to your point, whether it's this case that you just mentioned, which, it's actually really interesting. As I mentioned, we've been in cannabis for a long time. And when I heard that story and read that story, it sounded very odd to me. The way I understood the story is it was in their pre-roll packaging room, and there was so much keef, right, that it blocked this person's airway when they were trying to breathe. And I don't believe that to be fact, right? I've been around a lot of keef in my life and a lot of cannabis. There's never been a keef storm so big that it would block someone's airway. What there has been, though, constantly, whether it's a trimmer or just someone walking through the garden, depending on the type of cannabinoid, terpene, flavonoid, profile that's within that cultivar, there could be an allergic reaction, right? And that allergic reaction can, in very, very severe cases, and Dr. Mary might have some better insight into this as well, may cause some issues with breathing, and that may have happened. And it's important for cannabis media to tell these stories as fact. Otherwise, what we end up, potentially going down are more of these, early stories of cannabis that, people are going to go crazy and just these false narratives about what happens. And that's why it's important to have these partners that Cannabis Now works with to get the facts behind these stories when they do happen. And Cannabis Now and one of our other portfolio companies, SC Labs, actually ended up playing a very meaningful and critical part in that Ebola crisis, right? When people were showing up at hospitals because they were consuming these vape pens that they were dying from, right? And it became this massive story, and then very quickly it was shut down when labs like SC Labs were saying, wait a second, no. We've tested it. That's not what's going on. There's millions of product that has hit market and it's fine. We've tested this and this is what's in it. And this is where it's coming from. And then Cannabis Now gets to tell that story, and other media outlets get to tell that story, and quickly shut down that narrative. Mm-hmm. I think that's what is so meaningful and critical in today's culture of cancel culture, and we hear stories like that. It can be dangerous. So immediately when I heard that story, I said, wait, I got to figure out what this is. And when I saw that, I said, come on, there could be allergies, and it's important because people with certain allergies may not want to work directly with the plant in the industry, and there are ways to figure that out pretty quickly, right? So
it's funny is that there's a grower in Massachusetts at Cellular Therapeutics. He comes from the Emerald Triangle, and he's allergic to THC, and he's the head grower at this dispensary. And I've always found that fascinating. But Dr. Mary, you know this, I know this because I see a ton of commercials. Whenever they have the disclaimers at the end of the big pharma commercials, don't take this if you're allergic to Cetera or whatever it is. How do you find out if you're going to be allergic to something until you take it?
Until you take it. Well, I think the key takeaway of this story of this person that died because of an exposure to cannabis, whether it was an inhalational and they just simply couldn't oxygenate because their lungs were too full of other things, if it was that, or if it was an allergic reaction, or if it was just an unfortunate event, because people sometimes have heart attacks, in the middle of doing their job. So who knows exactly what took this person out? But the important thing is that is only the second person in the history of the world to have died from cannabis exposure, if it in fact was. And the first one was a mule who had a big bale of cannabis improperly tied behind him in the truck. And then when he had to stop fast, the bale rolled onto him and killed him. So we are talking about an incredibly safe plant. So no reason to blow up this unfortunate event that happened this week at that facility.
There you go. Well, Dr. Mary Clifton, as always, you're awesome to talk with and be friends with. And I look forward to seeing you at the Arcview event
next week,
this weekend in New York City. Jeff, you want to have the final word about, your big sales pitch, if you will? If people haven't signed up, they can still register. Am I right?
Yep. So registration is still open. There's a lot to see. We've got a lot of investors coming. We thought long and hard about what we wanted to accomplish with this event. After doing 45 of them in the past and having a 2.5-year hiatus, wanted to make sure we got it right. So we're going to focus on and honor the community that built Arcview, but we want to extend it. We want to focus on nuanced content. We want it to be content you haven't heard before. Right? We want to focus on entrepreneurs, investors, and operators. And then finally, we want to sort of honor and support diversity, inclusion, and erasing this horrendous war on drugs. You'll see that evidence throughout our panels and our speakers. And we think it's going to be a great event. And anybody who wants to come, just go to arcviewgroup.com, go to events and look for the link, sign up, and we would love to see you.
Live in NYC. That's the big thing that comes up on the Arcview website. So thank you.
Live in NYC.
That's right. And Jeff Finkle, thank you so much for joining us. I know you made the effort, and all you people, all the others on this panel, including Dr. Mary and Josh, you were tremendous over the last 30 minutes, I just want to say.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Now, you know how I feel about you. So thank you for helping us book a lot of these guests, and that's not lost on me either.
Yeah.
So for everybody on the Pro Cannabis Media team and all our guests on Green Rush Live this afternoon that we do really live every Friday at 4 p.m. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly and please don't go anywhere because our news is coming up next. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, over 70% of Americans support President Biden's initiative to reform federal cannabis laws, while industry reaction is mixed. U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra is already working with the FDA to review cannabis's federal scheduling status. Major League Baseball welcomes Charlotte's Web as their first official CBD sponsor.
Everything's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. So go right.
3 days of very high lifestyle show was a huge success in Boxborough, Massachusetts, filled with celebrities and entertainment. All that and more on We Talk News with Elena Pinto next. Pro Cannabis Media original content is sponsored by Revolutionary Clinics, with 3 locations in the greater Boston market where the medical patient comes first. And by Green Goddess Supply, your online paraphernalia superstore and the home of the Armoire Indoor Growing System. And by Holyoke Cannabis, the sponsor of the Massachusetts Cannabis Report. And by TCP Lighting, grow like a pro with Style Lighting's LED Grow Kit. And by Charles River Insurance, your experienced insurance specialist for the cannabis industry. And Greenspoon Martyr, one of the most respected law firms in the cannabis industry.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena Pinto for Pro Cannabis Media, and welcome to Weed Talk News. It's been a week since President Joe Biden announced he would award pardons to those with federal cannabis charges and asked the federal government to reconsider the schedule status of cannabis. And 7 days into this call to action, a new poll from Politico shows nearly 2/3 of American voters support that move, and 69% saying they'd like to see the classification of the plant change under federal law. But upon further investigation into what this move actually means, outlets like the Washington Post found that no one is actually currently in federal prison for simple cannabis possession. The pardons, however, will help clear some level of charges for at least 6,000 people and help victims of the war on drugs. Benzinga also reports the pardons will apparently not help military members, but will increase the number of people eligible to apply to join the service. Vice President Kamala Harris appeared on Late Night with Seth Meyers this week, where he gently pressed her about what else can be done beyond calling state governors to make the same move.
So we start with that, and then we are, to your point, urging, and the president has been very clear, we're urging governors and states to take our lead and to pardon people who have been criminalized for possession of marijuana. And ultimately, though, as with so many issues, if Congress acts, then there is a uniform approach to this and so many other issues. But Congress needs to act. We're 29 days away from the midterms. Ask who you're voting for, where they stand on this, and I encourage you to vote accordingly.
It looks like some lawmakers at the state level are ready to consider some change. This week, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear said he's actively considering possible cannabis clemency actions the state can take. And he's directed a review of state-level cannabis cases to inform future steps. He's also encouraging people who've been convicted over marijuana alone to apply for a pardon.
Let me just say, nobody should ever go to jail for simple possession of marijuana. And right now in Kentucky, they don't. It could be that charge is with a bunch of other more serious charges. But to our knowledge, there isn't anyone in jail or prison in Kentucky right now solely for the simple possession of marijuana. Obviously, the charge could potentially do that, and there is, I know, a real concern by folks about that. But while we're analyzing this, anybody out there who this is the only thing on their record, go to our website and apply for a pardon.
A handful of other states have already expanded their expungement processes as of recent. And Marijuana Moment does a great job of breaking down where each state currently stands on that decision. While many are applauding this move from the White House, one congresswoman is calling on the president to do even more in his own backyard. Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton of the District of Columbia pointed out that because the district doesn't have statehood and is currently under a marijuana rider, DC does not have the authority to issue its own clemency. And now she's calling on the president to change that. Let's check in with Vote Pro podcast Phil Adams with more on what's happening on Capitol Hill this week.
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro podcast, and this is the Weed Talk News DC report. The Fed now says that state legalization of cannabis has had a significant positive impact on the U.S. economy. A report published by the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City finds that the emergence of the legal cannabis industry has contributed to employment and created stronger demand for commercial real estate. These, along with the growth in retail sales of cannabis, have generated significant tax revenues in legal states. The report also recognizes some challenges faced by the burgeoning cannabis industry, most notably the lack of access to traditional financial services due to federal prohibition. A federal court ruling could create a safe haven for cannabis paraphernalia imports in legal states. The U.S. Court of International Trade has ruled that state-level legalization provides an exception to the ban imposed under the Controlled Substances Act. That law defines drug paraphernalia as virtually anything intended to facilitate the introduction of a controlled substance into the human body. The case was brought after U.S. Customs and Border Protection denied the import of cannabis trimming equipment from Canada to Washington State in 2021. The plaintiff, Iteros Technologies USA, argued that federal law protects the importation of items authorized by local, state, or federal law. The court agreed, saying that the CSA clearly creates a statutory exemption for anyone authorized to manufacture, possess, or distribute such items. While the Justice Department is expected to appeal the case, Iteros is hailing the decision as a huge win for the cannabis industry. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
Meanwhile, Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra has already said publicly he's looking forward to working with Attorney General Garland to answer the president's call to action to review how marijuana has scheduled under federal law. And we will, of course, keep you updated on any scheduling changes that may happen. While we wait to see if more expungements happen at the state level, some of them are at least considering the legalization of medical or adult use cannabis. Could it happen in Pennsylvania? Claudia Post takes a closer look at where the Keystone State stands on legalization and pardoning prisoners.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm right here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. First up, could 2023 be the year of legal weed adult use in Pennsylvania? Maybe, but don't count on it. Kind of pessimistic. While all of the states around us have legalized adult use, we have failed to do so. So what's holding it up? Well, what's holding it up is Pennsylvania, which is what I call Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with Pennsylvania in between. You have a lot of people in the middle of the state who still think that marijuana is a gateway drug. But of course, they're going to have their cocktails, drink to their heart's content, get hammered, and that's okay. I don't know. I don't get it. So there are Democrats and Republicans in the middle of the state who do not want to see adult use legalized. Now, what are we missing? We're missing a lot of revenue, of course, because there's SEEP over the borders. People are going to go to New Jersey like they're doing now, and they're going to go to a rec store and they're going to buy it and then bring it back. Of course, they used to do that with alcohol, as I recall. Anyway, that remains to be seen, and it is going to be an issue in the upcoming midterms. As we all know, on Thursday, President Biden pardoned thousands of people convicted in the federal courts of marijuana possession and urged states to follow his lead. Our governor has been pro-cannabis from the beginning. And he said that he had coordinated a pardon effort, but that under state law, he doesn't have unilateral pardon authority. Again, the issue will likely come up for the next governor in Pennsylvania. We have two diametrically opposed opponents. One is Mastriano, who under no circumstance wants legalized adult use, and his Democratic opponent, Josh Shapiro absolutely supports legalizing marijuana for recreational use. Of course, Mastriano would not respond when requested from the Inquirer, our main newspaper here, about what his thoughts are, but of course, that's what he always does. Next, a series of investigative stories from Spotlight, PA, which, by the way, is a really good publication, really kind of unearths a lot of stuff that's going on in Pennsylvania, uncovered a lot of serious flaws in our medical marijuana program, which prompted for calls for change from doctors, patients, industry leaders, and policymakers. So here's what they found: misleading or dangerous tactics by cannabis business, unequal advertising rules, legal gray areas for workers and employers, and inconsistent enforcement by the administration. What's included in the report? First, a review of more than 60 websites revealed that some cannabis companies made statements that multiple health policies and addiction treatment experts call misleading, incorrect, or dangerous. The analysis focused on claims that companies made about using cannabis to treat opioid addiction. Now, frankly, I do know that many people who have been addicted will migrate to marijuana to mitigate the need for other things. And they use it as an adjunctive cure, if you will, to get off of opioids. I mean, wouldn't you rather smoke weed than, oxycodone? But of course, that's legal. So the other thing is, secondly, patients in Pennsylvania need approval from a physician before they can buy cannabis at dispensaries. Now, initial certifications often cost between $125 and $225 and must be renewed annually. Of course, that's a cost to people, and a big one. But unusual advertising restrictions and inconsistent enforcement have given an advantage to largely unregulated businesses, meaning they can charge whatever they want. Meanwhile, an individual physician working on their own in a small practice are not allowed unless they're designated by the state. Lastly, a review of more than a dozen state and federal lawsuits show how medical marijuana patients in Pennsylvania are being denied work, demoted, or fired for using the drug. Employers and workers alike have asked for greater clarity, but the legislature and the governor have so far failed to explicitly outline the rights, which makes absolutely no sense. So you could smoke marijuana, you can get the card, but then you can get fired because you smoke marijuana. I don't know. It's kind of a bizarre thing. Well, that's a wrap from Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post for Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. From Weed Talk News, have a fabulous week.
Arkansas is another state looking at legalization this year, specifically for medical use. But the campaign to do so may not be going quite as planned. The Arkansas Advocate reports the city of Little Rock sent a cease and desist letter to a group sponsoring Arkansas's recreational marijuana ballot initiative, demanding the group take down an ad they say depicted Little Rock police officers.
Brave men and women in law enforcement deserve our support. You can vote to support our law enforcement by voting for Issue 4 this election. Issue 4 will safely legalize the sale of cannabis to adults 21 and older and creates revenue that goes to more funding for local police departments, more funding for protecting our communities, more funding for safer streets.
A Little Rock city attorney says the department has received inquiries as to why it's supporting the amendment, quote, when in fact it is not, unquote. But Responsible Growth Arkansas has declined to remove the ad and disagreed that it contained any insignia or logo that identified the Little Rock Police Department. Also in the South, dozens of licensed cultivators in Mississippi have plants growing. More than 1,000 patients are registered, but the Mississippi State Department of Health has 0 investigators. and only 3 staffers currently overseeing the state's new medical cannabis program. Right now, only 1 testing facility has been licensed and is only partially ready to test products. Health department officials say the agency is in a 4-month provisional period with licensed businesses. And as it finds problems or violations, it's typically just issuing corrective actions, giving businesses a chance to straighten up without hitting them with fines or sanctions or calling in law enforcement. So hopefully they can get their staffing up to snuff before things get too wild. And it's not quite the Wild West, but some companies in Michigan seem to be taking tough blows from law enforcement. The owners of Great Lake Supplement CBD Company were recently raided via SWAT style, with police alleging the business is breaking laws regulating the commercial production and sale of marijuana. But the owners claim the business operates openly and legally under the state's Medical Marijuana Act. Another example of how the gray areas of legality can severely harm small businesses. And another medical-only shop, this one in Detroit, is suffering some legal penalties as well. Michigan Normal Executive Director Rick Thompson has the details.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Well, the AAA just held their first ever impaired driving summit at their Dearborn headquarters this week. Here's some highlights. We hate cannabis. Alcohol causes more driving fatalities than drug driving. We hate cannabis. The number of drug drivers on the road is increasing, and even though the numbers don't define how many people were using cannabis versus opioid drugs, we still hate cannabis. There you go. Now you're all caught up. By the way, this group will be pushing for more oral swab testing on the roadside for drivers suspected of having used drugs. You've been warned. On Tuesday, the cannabis community rallied on the steps of the Capitol building in Lansing, and it was spectacular. The weather was fantastic. The Capitol building allowed us to have tents, and boy, there were tents. More than 30 people spoke, including Senator Irwin, Adam Brook, the head of Indiana Normal, the Independent Party's candidate for governor, Dr. Whitty spoke, and many others, including myself. Regulated market brands, they had tents right next to unregulated market brands, and everyone worked together in harmony. Now, both regulated and legacy markets will always coexist, so why not just get along? Which was the theme of the day anyway. And in our final story, well, let's run through all the cool kid phrases, shall we? Cheater, cheater, pumpkin eater, liar, liar, pants on fire. Getting caught is a pain, said the House of Mary Jane. Yes, one of Detroit's medical-only facilities was busted a 1.5 years ago for having duffel bags and backpacks full of unlicensed and untracked cannabis inside their licensed provisioning center, and they're just now getting penalized for it. In May of 2021, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency inspectors made a surprise inspection at the House of Mary Jane facility on James Cousins in Detroit, and they found loads of untagged, non-metric cannabis. Now, by law, state regulators are not given the authority to seize anything, so they had to leave it all there with strict orders to preserve all those bags full of evidence of cheating, and then also preserve the last 30 days of video surveillance, which could also be called evidence of cheating. Guess what happened when investigators came back 5 days later? Yep, all the evidence of cheating was gone. I am so shocked. It took 7 months from May of 2021 until December of 2021 for the Marijuana Regulatory Agency to issue an order outlining the violations, which is too long. And it took from December 2021 until October of 2022 to negotiate the penalty House of Mary Jane agreed to, which is way too long. Our Cannabis Regulatory Agency has promised to step up enforcement actions against licensed cannabis companies who cheat, but the CRA needs to step up their standard operating procedures to adjust for these procedural failures and unnecessary administrative delays. Now, for all that cheating and deleting and misleading, The House of Mary Jane, they got a $75,000 fine and a 30-day license suspension. It took 17 months for this whole scenario to play out. The system needs to work better. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
Back in the US, California's cannabis market has been struggling for years. And this week, the state's attorney general announced that nearly 1 million illegally grown plants and more than 200,000 pounds of processed cannabis were seized by state authorities during the 2022 season alone. The attorney general said, quote, California has the largest safe, legal, and regulated cannabis market in the world, but unfortunately, illegal and unlicensed grows continue to proliferate. And many still argue the state's tax infrastructure is to blame for a large part of that. So let's travel north now to check in with Marianne Kersagi for this week's Oregon Report.
I'm Marianne from Alibi Cannabis with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Rapper Wiz Khalifa is coming to Oregon. Hotbox out in Ontario, just a stone's throw over the Snake River from the Idaho border, is hosting a free community concert October 15th. Definitely worth stopping by if you are in the area. Oregon's Governor Kate Brown is rated last, according to Morning Consult. So President Biden is coming to town this weekend to garner support for the Democrat running for governor. If you have an extra 10 grand, you can get a photo with him. Wild, the #1 cannabis edibles brand, which is based in Oregon, is launching a new line of solventless gummies. Due out in Q4, these look delicious. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
Even further north in Washington state, the 8th annual Cannabis Summit was recently held, where our own Josh Kincaid spoke on a panel discussing efforts to bring cannabis cafes to the state.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Washington just had their 8th annual Cannabis Summit. I was on a panel for a cannabis consumption lounge. It's still a Class C felony to maintain or operate a cannabis lounge in Washington State. But that was just one panel. So it was called Foundations and Futures, the 8th annual Cannabis Summit. Started off with a welcome opening from the director. And the keynote was Representative Shelley Kloba, who has been really helpful in my bill that I wrote to overturn that Class C felony on maintaining and operating a cannabis lounge. So Representative Kloba was in the House, and she's helped push a lot of our bills as well. There was a tribal innovation panel that was really interesting, and so I got to chat with the gal afterwards about tribal cannabis. Hopefully we'll get in to go and see one of those facilities and talk about that later on in the year. There was an equitable capitalization and commerce panel. Very interesting. All of these things can be found at the cannabisalliance.us. After lunch, we got to speak from a gal who was in jail for 87 years, and that's what the name of her company is called, is 87, Evelyn LaChapelle. Really interesting. Then it was the Social Consumption Lounge, where we talked about how to generate enough revenue, some of the obstacles that we needed to overcome, what's happened in the last 3 years since I've written the bill, COVID, pretty self-explanatory, and what we needed to do to move forward. After my panel, there was the Building Bridges to Safe Medicine panel, followed by the closing keynote for Dr. Sue Sisley, who everybody should know. Dr. Sue Sisley is on a lot of panels. So that was it. It was very interesting. Next week, you guys can find out more about Washington State's cannabis scene. But with that, we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge, reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
Traveling to New England now, we're nearly 2 weeks into recreational weed being legal in Vermont. And companies are reporting a big response for retail, with lines out the door and wait times nearing an hour. Jessie Lynn Dolan has the latest from Vermont this week.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. 7 new licenses were approved at this week's Vermont Cannabis Control Board meeting, including 4 retailers, 2 indoor cultivators, and 1 manufacturer. Since April, the Cannabis Control Board has held 147 public meetings. In this week's meeting, they clarified staff roles and advertising guidelines. All social media advertising posts must meet the advertising guidelines specified in Board Rule 2. The goal is ensuring that advertisements maintain child-friendly standards. With some of the legislatively mandated strictest advertising in the country, the board has made advertising violations some of the most serious offenses in the industry. Contrary to popular rumors, the board will not be closing the applications for retail licenses and would give adequate notice if they decide to do so. The Vermont Cannabis Nurses Association and Clean Green Certified will be hosting a cannabis professional and bud tender training, state approved, at the Cannabis Control Board itself in Montpelier on October 29th, as well as starting to offer virtual class options. The Free for Vermonters Cannabis Nurse Hotline launched this week and is accepting supporting partners. Check out vermontcannabisnurse.com for more information. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse and Ganjier, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
The Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission held a public meeting this Thursday, and one of the main topics of interest involved the commission's new chair. Weed Talk News producer Tori Chamberlain has the details in this week's Bay State Report.
Hey guys, this is Tori Chamberlain with the Massachusetts Report this week. And the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission held a public monthly meeting this week that got pretty interesting. The main focus of discussion was around licensing, not only for businesses that were looking to renew their licenses, but also for those who have been awarded a provisional license and now they're looking to be awarded their final license and begin operations and getting revenue. What makes this situation really interesting for the Cannabis Control Commission right now is that the current chair of the commission, Shannon O'Brien, was until recently a 50% owner in one of these companies, Greenfield Greenery Cultivation. Records show that she stepped away from that ownership several months back, and that earlier this year in 2022, the company submitted an application to the Cannabis Control Commission to change ownership. So currently, the commission is facing two applications from this company, one for final approval on licensure and one to change ownership from the person who is now the chair of the commission. The meeting that happened this week lasted nearly 6 hours and was filled at times with some kind of contentious discussion about what should be done to handle this situation going forward. A lot of the discussion focused around language and how that's going to be adopted into how the commission handles this going forward. Basically, what was decided is that right now the commission's investigation team is going to be looking into the ownership side of things, and the licensure provision for them is just going to be on hold sort of for now. And some advocates argue and speculate that maybe that might not be totally fair to the other employees and people who are working at Greenfield Greenery. By all statutory standards, it seems that the company is compliant by state standards and should be awarded their license to operate. But this situation with Shannon O'Brien coming out of the ownership of the company is really making it an interesting and unprecedented one for the commission to handle. So they wrapped up that meeting with adopting a proposal to move forward, basically leaving this flexible as they go forward, keeping the two processes separate, but also wanting to look at them together so that they have what they say will be all the facts. That's what's going on in the Bay State this week. I'm Tori Chamberlain. See you next time.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
Also here in the Bay State, last week, we gave you a sneak preview of the High Lifestyle event in Boxborough, and our own Jimmy Young has the inside look at all the celebrities and community that turned out for the event.
Everything's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. So roll my boat right. Oh no, don't shed your tears. No, no,
Billed as Nican Presents, Gary Sommer's production of The High Lifestyle Show. And it was the Whalers concert at the Boxborough Regency that was the big highlight of the High Life cannabis-friendly trade show and arts festival.
Indian hemp arrives on ships, tinctures for white American lips. Legal medicine for 100 uses. No drug abuse, no bust, no bruise, no fuss, no news. Just trust in that old-fashioned cannabis Americana. Way before it became known as marijuana.
That's Cannabis, a Viper vaudeville. This exceptionally talented group from New York shared the musical history of cannabis as they headlined the first night of this show for the so-called highly functioning people.
Set free, this old rocking chair ain't never gonna get me. Cause when I get low, I get high. Let's get high, boys.
Speaking of parents, both you and Tommy are now working with your adult children. How rewarding is that? How much fun is that?
It is really great, to see them develop with their own mind. Joey, my son, who's here tonight, I don't know where he is.
It's tough to see through these lights, you know that.
I feel like an interrogation.
Yes, that was the legendary Cheech Marin. He was the headliner interview on Sunday. And John Provost, a Hollywood legend who started his career as Timmy on Lassie. And he's been around Hollywood royalty for decades.
Got a phone call a year ago from a young man who just finished a sci-fi story movie that he was doing. And he calls and he says, we'd like you to do the voice of a robot in our new sci-fi movie. And I'm going, well, I've never done. Now, June Lockhart, when she left the farm, she went to outer space. Well, I'm finally going to find out where she got lost, So, it just goes on and on. So I keep playing.
That's great. The Land of the Moonshins, I created in '79. It was a comic strip that I did in the newspaper.
And then there's Bill Diamond, another legend, this time as a TV producer, puppeteer, and creative genius who entertains wherever he is.
Everybody's favorite Christmas character, the Grinch, is here.
And the reason the Grinch is, well, we all grew up with it, of course, but I'm good friends with Sarah Karloff. And her dad did the narration, the first Grinch. So when they were doing a Chuck Jones tribute, I was going to do a Dr. Rock thing out in Vegas. They had Chuck Jones there. And so we were going for the 50th anniversary. And one of those elements was Sarah's dad. And so I talked to Sarah about it, and then we unveiled the Grinch over there for the 50th anniversary. So we built a full size and played Boris's narration. And this way Sarah could always tell, the story about her dad, which she kind of learned from us. Now, I have a puppet of Boris Karloff, which when I started Monster TV 20 years ago, I went to Sarah and I said, what do you think? When we hung out for a while. And so I created the Karloff puppet. And basically when Karloff would talk, he'd go, oh, no problem, my dear friends. We'd simply be there with the Grinch. Now, I won a Grammy for that. The problem is that little thing they gave me was just a doorstop. and she loved it. And so we wound up doing this project together, and everyone loves the Grinch.
Weed, music, highly functioning people, arts, and business. Kind of a normal weekend for the cannabis industry. From Boxborough, Massachusetts, Jimmy Young reporting for Weed Talk News.
That does it for Weed Talk News this week, everyone. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so use it wisely. I'm Elena Pinto for Pro Cannabis Media, and we'll see you next time.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv